Inquisitor Malagaro has made the black elixir before, claiming it as the most potent poison in existence. Helena returns with us to the forest encampment and tells us what Piety's plans were in this area. Besides the baleful gem, Piety was looking for the instrument for injecting calibric extantia, or essence of virtue gem, which is referred to as Malagaro's spike. Helena's arrival stirs mixed feelings in the forest encampment. Most are distrustful, but we have proven our power by defeating Fidelitas, so the members of the encampment ask us to help with other quests in exchange for helping us find Piety. Nina has already asked us to kill a large bear called the Great White Beast. If you have, she will ask you to go to the Fellshrine ruins and retrieve the good man's hand. Aramir asks us to handle 3 bandits that live in camps across the Frisian forest, who are fighting for control over the area. Apparently, each bandit took a piece of a small pyramid that the encampment held, an artifact that granted enhanced strength. If we collect the 3 pieces, we can make the small pyramid whole and grant some peace to the encampment. We learn that the overly large beasts in the area are all experiments of Malagaro, including the Great White Beast and a large spider to the west named the Weaver. Silk tells us that he had Malagaro's spike, not knowing its history, and that it was his favorite weapon, but he lost it trying to fight the Weaver. To the south of the crossroads are the Fellshrine ruins. The Fellshrine ruins were once the Frisia Cathedral, presided over by Archbishop Joffrey. Joffrey was a Templar and starkly anti-thaumaturgy. He was horrified that Emperor Chittis had allowed Malagaro's laboratory, a place for extreme thaumaturgical experiments on beasts and people alike, to be built so close to his cathedral. In part due to this discussion, Archbishop Joffrey plotted with the leader of the Purity Rebellion, High Templar Vol, to kill Malagaro and destroy the laboratory that Joffrey himself dubbed the Chamber of Sins. Malagaro learned of this plan. When Joffrey sent men to attack the laboratory, they were killed, and Malagaro sent his own men to kill Joffrey in his cathedral and succeeded. Archbishop Joffrey's spirit was brought back to life by the cataclysm and remains in the ruins of the cathedral to this day, at the Golden Hand Shrine where he was killed. You can kill Joffrey to safely get the hand, or avoid his attacks and take the hand, leaving his spirit there.
I believe they will help
The 3 bandits vying for power over the Frisian forest are Creighton, Oak, and Alira. All 3 are Oriath exiles. The 3 were assisting a woman named Lily Roth, who we will meet later, in retrieving an artifact called the Teardrop from the Templars in Theopolis. The 3 bandits reside in different areas of the forest, and you can either help one bandit and receive their reward, or kill all the bandits and receive Aramir's reward. With either choice, we can collect the 3 parts to complete the small pyramid called the Apex that was stolen from the Asmiri. Creighton lives east of the crossroads on the Broken Bridge. Oak is northwest of the encampment in the wetlands. Alira is in the western forest. In this western forest, we also see the other side of the gate Piety sealed in Act 1. We can kill her lover, Captain Archery, to unlock this gate. The small pyramid is an ancient artifact that has resided with these Asmiri descendants for some time. But the Asmiri are not known for pyramids. There is an ancient civilization come and gone that lived alongside the Asmiri that are known for pyramids, a civilization we will learn much about, called the Val. In the western forest, we find groups of trees covered in spiderwebs indicating the entrance to the Weaver's chambers, where Malagaro's spike was dropped. We must fight our way through a maze of spiders to find and kill the Weaver, a large spider that was once Malagaro's experiment. We know that Malagaro's spike was used as a tool to inject calibric extantia. We can also use it to contain venom from the Weaver, which combined with the baleful gem makes the powerful poison black elixir. Up in the wetlands, there is an old tunnel covered by the roots of the great tree Lorata. Aramir says this is the oldest tree in this part of the continent, which means it must die. We learn that this entrance is likely to an old Val ruin. Helena tells us that Piety, along with studying the works of Malachi's students, is greatly interested in the Val. Piety, Helena, and the Blackguards had tried to enter this area beneath Lorata's roots to no avail. With the black elixir, we are able to ruins are filled with sarcophagi, and Aramir refers to the place as the tomb. The Val civilization lasted from at least 900 BIC, the recorded first contact with the Asmirian people, until the fall of the Val in 400 BIC. Piety is interested in the Val because the Val was people who used thaumaturgy and virtue gems, which they called tears of Majid, pardon the pronunciation again. The Val were the first to create any virtue gems that we know of. Fun fact, the difference between regular skill gems and Val skill gems is the need for sacrifice, killing enemies and harvesting their souls to utilize a Val gem. While we eventually learn a lot about Val culture and its various traces found in modern Rayclass, the significance of these particular ruins are a mystery. As we make our way through the maze-like ruins, we must break an ancient seal that blocks our path forward. Once we release the seal, the entire forest is blanketed in darkness. By releasing the seal, we have awakened something. When Tarkus Baruso founded the Empire, he intentionally did so on the ruins of the Val, saying, "The Val closed their eyes to flesh and stone, to blood and bronze. We are not Val. We are Asmiri. For now and forever, our eyes are open." It is written by Trinian, historian of the Val and Eternal Empire and intellectus prime during the Cataclysm 300 years ago, that in 5 IC, shortly after the Eternal Empire was founded, a darkness overtook the lands around Sarn. Some believed it to be a strange weather pattern described as perpetual
Was haben
night.
wir denn hier noch Feines?
Emperor Caspero, the second emperor, was found dismembered by something referred to as a dark being,
Hieß gar
only
nichts?
5 years after he began his reign. In 35 IC, General Alano Frisia led a group into the lair of this beast, in the former realm of the Val, and sealed it away for eternity, ending the perpetual night. It is likely that the seal we release that causes the darkness is this same seal from General Frisia in 35 IC. It's also possible this forest was named after Frisia for his heroism in sealing this dark being. So good job us for undoing it. We continue past the broken seal, through the northern forest to the caverns, which sprawl underground, and eventually dump out into the base of a large Val pyramid. We ascend the levels of the pyramid, ending up in the apex where a dark altar sits. The altar is missing the very top of its pyramid, which is the same size as our small pyramid we restored from the bandits. Placing our pyramid onto the altar, a rumbling begins, and a large being called the Val Oversoul looms before us. The altar itself seems to be the body of this strange mechanical beast. This dark being is what killed Emperor Caspero. Rather than sealing the dark being away once more, we fight. Upon defeating the Val Oversoul, a feat no one before us could accomplish, the darkness dissipates. Another rumbling is heard, and a passage opens up from the top of the pyramid, leading us to the outskirts of Sarn. Thank you so much for watching. It's your boy Noodle. If you like this series, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Maybe even punch that bell button. If you're interested in seeing these videos early or getting exclusive videos and perks, check out my Patreon. If you have questions, feel free to leave a comment or come join my stream, twitch.tv/hiddencatnoodle. The stream schedule will be updated there.
Damn.
Thanks again, and stay sane, Exiles. Welcome back, Exile, to another video in Noodle's Complete World series. This video is covering
Ja, die Familie, bla bla bla.
So buckle up and let's get started. When we emerge from the Val Pyramid of Act 2, we find ourselves in the outskirts of the city of Sarn. We follow the Chittis River up north, getting closer to the city's center. On our way, we run into a woman being held hostage by Piety's blackguards. This is Clarissa, an exile of Oriath. When we defeat the blackguards surrounding her, Clarissa tells us that she and her boyfriend Tolman were found by Piety herself, and Piety has taken Tolman. She asks us to find Tolman for her and agrees to meet us at the encampment by the Grand Arena of Sarn. Sarn is the first city founded in the Eternal Empire by the Asmiri Tarkus, established in 1 IC. Baruso came down from the Esmerian mountain ranges through the Doomlands to
Oh.
Exile Val, where
Oh.
Queen Adsiri reigned until the fall of the Val. Sarn is built on these Val ruins. We saw other ruins of the Val in Act 2, as the Val were a powerful, sprawling culture from 900 to 400 BIC. Baruso sealed off everything Val, including the pyramid we escaped from, and banned thaumaturgy and those who meddled with it. The city of Sarn was the seat of the Empire until the Purity Rebellion of 1333 IC. Sarn is where the final battle of the Purity Rebellion took place in 1334 IC, with High Templar Vol leading his many armies against Sarn and the reigning Emperor Chittis Parandus. Vol gathered support from the Karui, led by Kaum, as well as the Ezamites and the Marraketh. Vol even sowed distrust of Emperor Chittis amongst the common people of the Empire and those concerned with the use of virtue gems and thaumaturgy that Chittis coveted. Now that the High Templars are in power and the Cataclysm has wrecked Rayclast, they rule from Oriath. The Sarn encampment is built near the ruins of the Grand Arena of Sarn, which stands in the middle of Sarn, surrounded by the waters of the
Wow,
Chittis
leck.
River. Within Sarn there are two temples,
Oh
one
shit,
for the
wie kommt
sun
das
god
denn?
Solaris and one for the moon god
Das sind 500 Megabyte, sollte
There is
sollte schnell
an
vorbei sein.
expansive marketplace, a library, and a cathedral built by Emperor Chittis. Clarissa is at the Sarn encampment along with Pargan, Maramoa, and Grigor. We learn that Clarissa
Oh,
has
ich hasse
studied
Frostway.
thaumaturgy herself and has known Piety since before she took the name Piety. Piety, when she was known as Vinya, used to purchase ingredients for thaumaturgy from Clarissa back in Theopolis. Clarissa was exiled to Rayclast because her father gambled away their money and the family had to do illegal work to keep fed. In fact, Pargan helped procure Clarissa and her family this work back in Theopolis. Pargan is an Oriath who seems knowledgeable of black market dealings and the underground, past and present. He's quite jovial, but the others warn you he does not give anything without expecting something in return. Maramoa is a Karui that was exiled from Oriath as well. Maramoa is a warrior, but she is also extremely knowledgeable about history. Grigor is an Ezamite man who is horribly disfigured from the thaumaturgical experiments Piety practiced on him. He was caught by General Gravisius, one of Piety's blackguards, while trying to find the
Inventar
remains
ist
of
voll
the fabled
lächerlich.
Gemling Queen in the Solaris Temple. Gravisius gave Grigor to Piety as his punishment. Clarissa knows General Gravisius as well, from back on Oriath, where he was working for the current ruler,
Oh, ich
High
muss ja
Templar
erst
Dominus.
identifizieren.
Both Piety and Gravisius
Nein,
are
liegt
now
doch mal
on
da.
Rayclast.
Der
Knowing
der
that
Lappen,
Piety
ey.
has
Der
Tolman,
Lupen.
we exit the Sarn encampment
Der
into
olle
the
Lumpen,
slums
ey.
to find them.
Sinn,
We
ey.
wander past a locked entrance to the sewers and eventually find the crematorium. The crematorium itself is pretty self-explanatory, although it seems to have prison cells as well. When we
Selber.
enter, we can hear screams, which we can presume are
Yeah.
Tolman. We find Piety and her blackguards around a chair which Tolman has been strapped to. We attack Piety, but at the last minute she escapes once again. Tolman has unfortunately passed, and we retrieve his bracelet to return to Clarissa as proof we had found him. We return Tolman's bracelet, and Clarissa gives us keys to the sewer we passed earlier.
Ey,
which
warte,
can
das
be
ist nur ein
navigated
Trank.
to get deeper into the city and hopefully find Piety. Pargan tells us
Ja,
that we're
ordentlich
going through the
Charges,
sewers
ne?
to watch out for 3 platinum busts that a man named Victorio, the people's poet, had stolen from
Ordentlich
Emperor Chittis
charges.
during the Purity Rebellion and smuggled into the sewers. Fun fact, one of the busts is of Marcius Lioni, the Gemling captain defeated by Kaum at Lioni's watch. Victorio was a popular poet around the time of the Purity Rebellion, who wrote in support of High Templar Vol and the people. He wrote his observations on the power and destruction of the virtue gems that Emperor Chittis so valued. Another fun fact, one of his writings is about Kalisa, the opera singer whose virtue gem became the star of Rayclast that transformed Merveil. Victorio's writings stirred unease in the people about Emperor Chittis and thaumaturgy, which helped Vol and his Purity Rebellion gain support. Victorio dubbed Emperor Chittis the Monkey King, and we can find graffiti all around Sarn condemning the Monkey King, his gemlings, and his shadow. Victorio was also known for being a thief. So many fun facts. Victorio is the one who stole Malagaro's initial black elixir, created from Malagaro's spike and the baleful gem, the that we recreate to kill the tree Lorata and enter the Val ruins. Victario had operated in these sewers to help the rebellion and spread dissent. In the sewers, we pass a monstrous puckered barricade called the Undying Blockage, which blocks the path to another area of Sarn. For now, we continue to our own exit, which leads us to the Horrendous Marketplace. The Marketplace is a sprawling, open-aired location overrun by the Undying, or undead gemlings, and living statues. When Emperor Chittis Parandus ruled, he was obsessed with thaumaturgy. Many of the nobility of Sarn and the Empire were interested in having virtue gems embedded in their skin, or implanted surgically like Brutus. These people were called gemlings, and both the Empire's army and its civilians took place in this type of thaumaturgy. A material called thaumatic sulfite was leftover material from refining virtue gems, and was used in multiple ways, including as a softening agent for the statues seen in Sarn. When the cataclysm struck, gemling people transformed into these Undying, and these statues formed with thaumatic sulfite came to life. Clearly, the link between the cataclysm and thaumaturgy is strong. The marketplace itself is as old as the city of Sarn and the Empire. While the marketplace isn't officially named the Parandus Marketplace, it was founded by the Parandus family and made the family incredibly wealthy. The Parandus family were influential figures in the Empire even before Chittis Parandus became emperor in 1319 IC. We travel through this marketplace to an area called the Battlefront, in the northeast part of Sarn. The Battlefront connects to the Solaris Temple, the docks, and the bridge to the Ebony Barracks, which has been magically blockaded by the blacksmiths. The bridge is guarded by Captain Aurelianus. We kill Aurelianus and take a treasure he was protecting, a ribbon spool of mysterious origin. While many seasoned players will skip straight to the docks at this point, it makes more sense lore-wise to continue on to the Solaris Temple. The Solaris Temple is one of two temples in Sarn, which give worship to the gods Solaris and Lunaris, the sun and the moon. Grigor tells us that the Eternals revered sun and moon as the two eyes of their god, the right eye judging Solaris, the left eye merciful Lunaris. We know that Grigor was caught and experimented on by Piety for trying to find the remains of a person called the Gemling Queen in the Solaris Temple. We search the temple and end up finding more than just remains of the Gemling Queen. She is still alive. This Gemling Queen is a woman named Diala. We can clearly see multiple virtue gems protruding from her head and shoulders. Lady Diala has an interesting way of speaking that is poetic and rambling, but her history is absolutely fascinating. Whether her odd behavior is the result of the cataclysm giving her madness, how she's always been, or simply eccentricities from surviving alone,
There's kind of cool moves there.
is hard to say. Lady Diala was one of Emperor Chittis Parandus' mistresses. Apparently, if Chittis got annoyed or tired of a mistress, he would hand that mistress over to his thaumaturgists. Diala was given to Malachi when she lost favor. Malachi, the teacher of both Chevron and Malagaro, embedded the virtue gems into Diala and she became the Gemling Queen. Diala loved Malachi and was willing to do as he asked. Diala tells us that Malachi was massively influential in Chittis Parandus' interest in virtue gems. In Victoria's poems about the monkey king Chittis, the shadow of the king is referring to Malachi. Maybe not so fun fact, during the Purity Rebellion, Diala killed the poet Victorio's lover, Merlin, as punishment for his writings against the Empire. Malachi told Chittis that these virtue gems could make citizens of the Eternal Empire more eternal. It was with Chittis' approval that Malachi was able to enlist students of thaumaturgy and have many thaumaturgical experiments take place across Rayclast. It is shocking that Diala survived not only the Purity Rebellion, but the Cataclysm without turning into an Undying. We find out that Malachi also survived the Purity Rebellion, even though he had been working so closely with the defeated Emperor Chittis. Apparently, Malachi convinced High Templar Vol, leader of the Purity Rebellion, that he could create a device to put an end to all thaumaturgy. Malachi, through his and his students' studies, had discovered the source of thaumaturgy, an entity which Malachi called the Beast. For over a year, Malachi and Diala stayed in this Solaris temple, working on Malachi's invention called the Rapture Device. She She tells us that Malachi convinced Vol that the device needed to be taken up north to cleanse Rayclast of thaumaturgy forever. Malachi, Viala, and Vol all traveled to this location with Malachi's rapture device, where Malachi asked Viala to sacrifice herself to complete the rapture. Viala refused, and somehow Malachi's use of the rapture device has caused a cataclysm that has devastated Rayclast.
What the
We'll learn
fuck?
more details of Malachi and his rapture device in Act 4, but for now we know Viala the Gemling Queen has survived by hiding out in the Solaris Temple. The ribbon spool we found in the battlefront is her device, used to make the living ribbons we have seen floating around and attacking us. Viala refers to us as not a cockroach, because she considers these blackguards to be cockroaches who feed on the corpse of a dead empire. Because we return this dangerous spool to Viala, she tells us that we can destroy the undying blockage in the sewers with thaumatic sulfite if we can bring it to her. The same leftover material from refining virtue gems that animates the sculptures of Sarn. Malachi had shipments of thaumatic sulfite come in via the docks. On the docks, we can find the thaumatic sulfite in question, but we also run into a familiar face, Captain Fairgraves. It turns out that Allflame didn't fully work when he tried to kill you in Act 1, and he now exists somewhere between human and ghost, still chained to his ship. He would like you to help him die, because once dead, the Allflame will resurrect him again, hopefully correctly. Fairgraves wants you to collect the Decanter Spiritus and the Chittis Plum for his quest. The Decanter Spiritus is an invention by none other than Malachi. It is a vessel that can turn any liquid quasi-apparitional in nature, as Fairgraves describes. Apparently, Malachi was interested in something called
Das wird stressig.
wine, or at least turning regular liquids into something corporeal. The Chittis Plum grows from a tree planted over Emperor Chittis' body. We learn through this quest that on the day Vol and his supporters marched on Sarn, Emperor Chittis was stabbed by Lord Ondar, mayor of Sarn. Emperor Chittis was a gemling himself, with a gem implanted above his heart. Book 5 of the Purity Chronicle says that Chittis, empowered with rage and strength from his virtue gem, sliced Ondar in half before he died. The Chittis plums are said to cause great agony and possibly death on consumption. When Fairgraves mixes the Chittis plums juice into the Decanter Spiritus, he is able to die.
Flaschen links da raus.
But for some reason, the Allflame has gone out, and we can assume that Fairgraves will not be resurrected after this final, agonizing death. We bring Viala the thaumatic sulfite from the dock, and she creates the Pout, which is a substance that can destroy the undying blockage. Viala knows that the sewer route will lead us to the Ebony Barracks, which the Blackguards have been barricaded. Arc fact. Viala knows about the sewer systems because she was given to Malachi when she asked Emperor Chittis where the town's poop went. Seriously, we head back to the Grand Arena. Grigor urges us to find and kill Piety as revenge for Piety deforming and torturing him. We know from Viala and Maramoa that the Blackguards and Piety have been seen with General Gravisius. Gravisius is the current High Templar Dominus's right-hand man. Everyone would like to see General Gravisius dead as well. Gravisius and Piety are working for Dominus on Rayclast. For reasons still unknown, we now learn that Dominus himself is also on Rayclast, instead of in Oriad. Dominus has set up a thaumaturgical laboratory of his own at the top of the Scepter of God, formerly known as the Chittis Cathedral. Rigor tells us that Dominus gets up and down this tower via elevator, afraid of the monsters inside it, but that the tower itself has been locked. Of course, there is the Eternal Labyrinth here and the lore of Ascension, how Chittis Parandus came to
Scheint
power.
nichts zu sein.
Unfortunately, Act 3 is already jam-packed. There's no way we can squash all of that information into any of the Act videos, so I will be doing a separate video about the lab. We use the Infernal Talc to destroy the undying blockage in the sewers and emerge in the Ebony Barracks on the northwest side of Sarn. Farther west is the Lunaris Temple, where we believe Piety is hiding. We see more Blackguards here and run into General Gravisius. Gravisius says some not-so-nice things to us, so it's a pleasure to kill him on everyone's behalf. Unlike the Solaris Temple, which seemed relatively untouched, the Lunaris Temple has been desecrated by the likes of Piety and other thaumaturgists. The first level has blackguards in it, but also necromancers and the evidence of
Oh,
thaumaturgical
das neu?
experiments. One such experiment is Cole, who is
So ein
reminiscent
Slam?
of Brutus from Act 1. Cole was Grigor's bunkmate when captured by Odysseus, a rapist from Oriath exiled as punishment.
Das könnte
Cole
cool
is
sein.
also one
Der
of Piety's
Slender?
experiments like Grigor.
Ja, genau.
And his
Und was man
similar
das
to Brutus
kombinieren kann.
suggests Piety may have learned something from her studies of Chevron's texts back in the prison in Act 1. As we descend to the second level, the evidence of Piety's thaumaturgy becomes grotesque. The temple is a horror scene. Everything is covered in blood, literal pools of blood taking up the majority of the floor. 4 failed experiments are impaled on spears amidst the blood pools. Corpses begin piling up on the floor as we make our way through this maze, following the ever-growing carnage leading to Piety. Finally, we see her, follow her to the final room, and begin to fight. But who is Piety, really? We have chased her around Ray class, trying to stop the havoc she's been causing. Piety was once named Vinia, and was a prostitute and thaumaturgist in Oriath. We know she used to purchase ingredients for her thaumaturgy from Clarissa. Since the short reign of High Templar Vol after the success of the Purity Rebellion, thaumaturgy has been outlawed in Oriath. The Purity Rebellion was an attempt to fight the monstrosities the Empire's interest in thaumaturgy had created and to purify Rayclast and Oriath.
Oh, nicht
Ruling
schlecht.
High Templars since
Das
the
können wir von
rebellion
diesem
have
Checkpoint
also
an.
stood against
Ah, hier ist gar
thaumaturgy,
kein Checkpoint. Okay,
and
dann
Vinia
ist
was
egal.
condemned to death for her crimes. Vinia was brought before High Templar Dominus, and they shared a dinner so Dominus could hear her confession. After this dinner and discussion, Vinia was not killed. Dominus renamed her Piety and became heavily interested in thaumaturgy himself. We ourselves have seen the power of thaumaturgy in the enemies we fight and the virtue gems we use to kill them. The power of thaumaturgy and its potential uses is highly persuasive. Piety has been ordered to gather all the information about thaumaturgy she can from Rayclast and bring that information to Dominus. It was only after Vinia became Piety and inspired Dominus' interest in thaumaturgy that Oriath criminals began
Oh,
being
sporks?
exiled to Rayclast rather than killed. We can speculate this was so Piety had people to experiment on away from Oriath to keep her experiments secret. Judging from the carnage in the Lunaris Temple, Piety has been doing a lot of experimenting. Piety has been learning all she can, in particular about Malachi and his works, hence her studies of Chevron, her interest in Malagaro's equipment, and her attempts to find the Gemling Queen in the Solaris Temple. We can now make our way towards the Scepter of God, where Dominus himself likely resides. We now know that Dominus is behind all of Piety's undertakings. The Imperial Gardens lead to the Scepter of God, but also the Sarn Library. The Sarn Library itself is pretty self-explanatory. Inside, however, is a ghost named Siosa, who is attached to a painting of himself. Siosa was a Karui slave who became a scholar and survived the cataclysm by having his spirit bound to this painting. He asks us to find 4 pages written by Isius Perandus, who was translating Val text in the library when Siosa was alive. These pages are in the archives, which Siosa cannot reach because he is stuck to a painting. We find the hidden entrance to the archives, begin gathering these golden pages, and find something interesting. The first 3 pages are written by Isius, translating Val texts regarding their interests in thaumaturgy and their communion with something called Nightmare. The 4th page is a direct
Ich glaube,
note
Spark
to
hat er ja
Siosa,
automatisch immer mehrere geschossen,
complimenting
deswegen ist es
Siosa's
kein
humanity and
Spark.
saying that his slavery will cause them to overlook you. A rather cryptic message. At the end of the 4th page, Siosa tells us that there is a note from Malachi to Isius, which reads, "My dearest Isius, I have been enlightened beyond expectation. Your work in translating these artifacts is worthy of the highest recompense, and thus I am delighted to offer you a position in my personal laboratory. Please do not give your escorts any consternation. I would be most pained to see such a precious asset damaged in any way. Malachi." Malachi kidnapped Isius to use him and his knowledge for his work. From what we've seen happen in the laboratories of other thaumaturgists, we can imagine that Isius did not meet a pleasant end, while Siosa was overlooked for his work in the library because of his background as a Karui slave. Fun fact, the scholar Trinian, the intellectus prime who wrote of the vow and founding of the empire, is an undying stuck in these archives. We leave Ciosa and the library to head to our final destination in Act 3, the Scepter of God. But what is the Scepter of God? It used to be the Chittis Cathedral before the Purity Rebellion. It is actually the site on which Emperor Chittis Brandis was betrayed and murdered by Lord Mayor Ondar. The fact that High Templar Dominus has taken over a cathedral once dedicated to the Emperor most embedded in thaumaturgy is no coincidence. Neither Piety nor Dominus actually enter the Scepter of God themselves, but we must enter and fight our way up the tower. The Scepter of God is overrun by gemling creations and creatures. Finally, we get to the top floor and take some stairs to the roof where Dominus waits. Dominus is the current High Templar ruling Oriath, but he is also the person responsible for our exile from Oriath. And now we know why. Beyond our crimes, Dominus has been using exiles as fodder for his and Piety's thaumaturgical experiments. The roof has been transformed into a thaumaturgical laboratory like those we have seen before. Dominus and Piety are convinced that the use of thaumaturgy can bring them closer to God and the betterment of mankind overall.
Spannend, hier kommst du mal.
Bad exiles. They could give knowledge back to Oriath. This is why Vinya was spared.
Oh, schade, mein Totem. Ich hab Angst.
Dominus the vision of leadership through thaumaturgy. Dominus still sees himself as utilizing the tools of thaumaturgy rather than scorning them. Dominus begins the fight relatively normally, using powerful methods to attack us. He screams at us about the power of God, such as, "Shrink not from God," or "Touch your God." When it seems to kill him, he shouts, "This world is an illusion." He resurrects a monster, a giant bug, writhing from the ground with the same mask Dominus had been wearing. Here we witness the true face of thaumaturgy and God. On killing High Templar Dominus, Fiala appears to congratulate us for embracing death and generously sharing it with those that stood in our way. She opens the door to the aqueduct, a channel built to move water, and we follow this aqueduct straight to begin.
Meaningless life ends now.
Thank you so much for watching. It's your favorite Noodle. If you enjoyed the video, you enjoyed the series, please consider
We'll never
subscribing.
surrender.
Video a like, smash that bell button. If you have any questions or you want to hang out, feel free to check out my Twitter. If you want to support or vote on the next videos after we finish the
God will end your meaningless life.
But until next time, stay safe. Hello again, Exile. Welcome to another video in Noodle's complete lore series. This video covers Act 4. So let's begin. After defeating High Templar Dominus on the roof of the Scepter of God, we leave Sarn via the aqueducts to the north. We end up in Highgate, which was a mining town during the Empire's existence. Sits at the base of the Azure Mountains, in particular Mount Orluz. In the beginning of the Eternal Empire, the first Emperor Baruso has used mines to mountains to steal away the virtue gems of the vow that had been left around Raycross after the fall of the vow in 400 BIC. During Emperor Chittis Brandis' reign, starting in 19 IC,
Nope.
the Eternal Empire used Rui, Esmite, and Mariketh slaves to mine the mountains near Highgate for the virtue gems. Highgate is inhabited by Mariketh. The Mariketh are a matriarchal society native to the Western Plains.
Iets.
During the Purity Rebellion, High Templar Volt entreated the Mariketh to join the
Oh, es ist
rebellion
okay.
and fight the slaves
Aber
of the
eigentlich könnte
Empire,
es gut sein für mich.
and to take down a man named General Titusius, who worked for Emperor Chittis specifically to hold the Vastiri Plains from the conquered Mariketh. Titusius was known as the Scourge of the Mariketh. Mariketh's leader at that time was Sekema Deshret.
Ach
We will discuss
nö.
Titusius and Deshret in detail later. But after the success of Vol's Purity Rebellion, Deshret and her Akara, which means tribe, stayed in Highgate, specifically to guard these mined mountains. Deshret sealed off the mines so that nothing could enter or escape them. The NPCs of Highgate are Oyun, Kira, and Tasuni, all Mariketh, and a couple named Pitaris and Vanya. Diala, the Gemling Queen, has joined us from Sarn. Oyen is the current Sekama, or leader, of the Merrikat. Kira is a descendant of Deshret, and a Dakara, meaning warrior, of the tribe. Tasuni is her brother, a blind man who suffers from strange visions. Tasuni was born blind, and it is Merrikat tradition to discard any weak or disfigured children, much like Spartans. He was left out in the Visteri Plains after his birth to die, but somehow survived, which had never previously happened. Thus, he is allowed to live with the tribe. Tasuni seems to have communion with the beast, or nightmare, that Malachi sought, and that the Val had written about. Pitaris was a captain of the Blackguards under Dominus and Piety. Vanya was a witch exiled from Oriath, imprisoned and soon to be experimented on by Piety. Pitaris let Vanya free, and they escaped together to Highgate. Diala tells us that Malachi's rapture device, the device Templar allowed Malachi to create to destroy thaumaturgy, is within the sealed mines under Mount Baruso. Vol, Malachi, and Diala all traveled to Highgate with the rapture device and took it down into the mines to use on this entity called the Beast, which Malachi claimed was the source
Schau mal, dass
of all
noch
thaumaturgy.
Crafting-Methoden hinzugefügt
Malachi
werden.
entered the lair of the beast by himself, and his communion with the beast and its powers of nightmare was the cause of the cataclysm in 1336 IC. As we've seen, the cataclysm killed many, caused others to go mad, and reanimated the dead. Vol was no exception, and he turned into a bloodthirsty, monstrous version of himself. Oyen tells us that he still wanders around the dried lake off of Highgate. The dried lake was once a large natural lake, but it has been siphoned out to the city of Sarn via the aqueducts we traveled along. The undead Vol has been terrorizing the Merrikat in Highgate since the cataclysm from his new home in this dried lake. Vol stands by his confession. I vowed to care for this empire with my eyes open. I lied to my people. I lied to myself. Blinded by my love for purity, I placed my faith in the most beloved of men. I have failed you, my empire of purity. Do not forgive me, but please, I beg of you, survive me. Vol was the leader of the Purity Rebellion before the Cataclysm, but before he became the Emperor after this Purity Rebellion, he was the High Templar. The High Templars are a religious order of Oriath. The Empire, when founded by Tarkus Varuso, believed in banning and burying all thaumaturgy, past or present, but Emperor Chittus Ferrandus was heavily invested in thaumaturgy. The High Templars believe in purity, and Vol in particular believes that purity was the opposite of the thaumaturgy rampant under the reign of Emperor Chittus. In his time, High Templar Vol was seen as a champion of freedom and justice. He was a hero to the common folk and those oppressed by the Empire. His reasons for the Purity Rebellion were noble: to save humanity from unchecked power, political or thaumaturgical. The Merrikat had been terrorized by a Gemling general named Hector Titusius. Titusius' duty was to control the Vastiri Plains, the native land of the Merrikat, and keep it secured for the Empire. Titusius was a virtue gem enthusiast, allowing Malachi to replace every joint in his body with implanted virtue gems. He was particularly violent towards the Merrikat, and so Vol promised to help the Merrikat, led by Sekama Deshret, take down Titusius. Vol and his operatives discovered Imperial spies within the Merrikat and gave them false information about a Merrikat uprising, knowing the info would get back to Titusius. Titusius led his legion to the false location where Deshret and her Akara were waiting. The Merrikat were able to track the dust storms of the Vastiri Plain, and they planned a day in which this location would be hit by a fierce storm. Deshret and her Akara used the cover of the dust storm to their advantage as they killed Titusius' entire Gemini legion. It is said that Deshret saved Titusius and used his skin as her Roa's saddle. Thus, High Templar Vol helped the Merrikat defeat their main foe and reclaim their homelands. And in return, Deshret and the Merrikat helped Vol succeed in his purity rebellion against Chittus and the Empire. After the Cataclysm, many people in Raycast were killed, turned, or brought back to life. Deshret had seen many of these monstrosities, and she was alarmed at the devastation
Du Spinner.
The mines under Heidi.
Au.
She sealed the mines and commanded Furakara to remain to guard them. Wolf himself ended up as an undead monster. After escorting Malachi and the raptor device to the mines of Mount Baruso, the undead bull wandered to the dried lake, violent and crazed, and killed Deshret himself. Deshret carried a banner with her, which was the key to opening the sealed-off mines. Because of Bull's terrible power, the rest of Furakara have stayed away from the dried lake. It's sad to think that the leader of the Purity Rebellion was turned into a thaumaturgical nightmare himself, and killed an ally he'd worked with so closely. To open the mines, we must go to the dried lake and kill the undead High-Tech Wolf. He drops Deshret's banner, which will allow us to open the mines. In Act 1, we learn that after the Cataclysm, Count began having visions he believed were from Tukohama to lead his people to an offering that will save the Karui. He led 500 of his greatest warriors north into Rayclast, and the final destination of this group was in the mines below Mount Baruso. Deshret witnessed Kaum and his Karui disappear into the mines, some years before she sealed them. Kasuni is able to hear the beast, and we know from Diala that Malachi's destination with the raptor device was inside the mines. But Kasuni claims that he also hears the spirit of Deshret herself within the mines. We open the seal with Deshret's banner and begin our descent into Mount Baruso. The mines are littered with terrifying creatures, monsters of melded flesh, likely mutated from the thaumaturgical waste and tears of Maji, aka virtue gems, buried within. There are 3 levels of the mines. Upon entering the mines, the entire system shakes, seemingly in anticipation of our arrival. On the 2nd level, we are able to find the spirit of Deshret, even though Deshret did not physically die in the mines. Somehow, her spirit had been trapped down in the mines since her death. We free her from the grasp of the ghostly air and continue into the mines. The 3rd level is called the Crystal Mines, and we can see this is where many of the virtue gems were likely stored, or perhaps just what's left after Emperor Chittis sent his Karui and Elfite slaves to mine for gems in it. At the end of these crystal mines, we find Diala waiting for us, standing next to the raptor device and 2 portals. The 2 portals next to Diala are called Kaum's Dream and Duresso's Dream, and Diala tells us that Malachi lured both the spirits of Kaum and Duresso here for his own purposes. The voice that called to Kaum under the guise of Tukohama was actually Malachi using the beast's power of nightmare. Kaum and Duresso's spirits are now both trapped here, each eternally reliving the peak of emotion. For Kaum, it is fury, and for Duresso, it is desire. Kaum's dream takes us to our first map-like instance. It is a recreation of the path which Kaum took his 500 best warriors on in search of Tukohama's offering.
Hahaha, so ein Noob.
Tukohama is the
Victory.
warrior god of the Karui. Legend has it that the Karui were peaceful farmers before Tukohama put stone axes in their hands and the hunger for conquest in their bellies. Kaum calls himself a son of Tukohama and has extreme reverence for the traditions and gods of his Karui ancestry. As we travel farther on the path Kaum took, we read on carvings that Kaum believed his warriors were crushing the servants of Kitava, the Karui god of hunger, and took pride that he let not one of his 500 fall as they traveled. But when Kaum reached what he believed was Tukohama, it asked him to kill his 500 warriors as a sacrifice, and Kaum did so willingly. We crushed the servants of Kitava beneath our heels as we marched across the land. I allowed not one of my 500 to fall. We descended into the heart of Rayclast, and there he came to me. Tukohama. He asked of me a sacrifice. I gave it willingly. My axe fell 500 times, the jade drinking its fill of Karui blood. Tukohama was pleased. This pinnacle of Kaum's fury is what Kaum's dream represents. When we reach Kaum and kill him, we receive the Eye of Fury and bring it back to Diala. The 2nd portal takes us to Duresso's Dream, which is a reincarnation of the Grand Arena of Sarn, where Duresso fought when he was alive. Unlike Kaum, it is unclear whether Duresso physically entered the mines, But as we've seen with Deshret, one does not have to physically die in the mines to have their spirit trapped here by nightmare. Duresso's dream shows us his desires from a young age to become the greatest gladiator in the Empire, but it also chronicles the story of how he met Merveil. We killed Merveil in Act 1, a woman transformed into a monstrous and crazed siren by a necklace called the Star of Rayclast. This necklace was a gift from Duresso, and he left Merveil in the middle of the night to find a cure for her transformation. We know Duresso never successfully found a cure, but now it seems Duresso's spirit was captured by Nightmare and forced to relive this desire for glory and his wife forever. When we slay Duresso, we receive the Eye of Desire and bring it back to Diala. After we brought Diala both the Eye of Fury and of Desire, she tells us we shall be able to activate Malachai's Rapture device. When Malachi first used the Rapture device to find the beast, he asked Diala to sacrifice herself to power the device. Whether or not this was actually necessary is not yet clear. Either way, Diala now willingly gives herself to the Rapture device to blow open an entrance into the core of the beast. When the device activates, the gems embedded in Diala across her head and body are ripped from her to power the machine. Before us stands a shriveled husk of a woman, looking how we might expect a 300-year-old woman to appear. Diala ushers us onward into what is called the Belly of the Beast. This Belly of the Beast is a path of literal entrails. Where the beast begins and ends, it is hard to say, but it seems we have literally entered the insides of this beast, the nightmare that Malachi resides in and Piety sought. As we travel through the intestines, we end up finding an old friend reborn under the influence of nightmare. Piety, who we killed in Act 3, has been found and resurrected as a nightmare version of herself and stands before us in the belly of the beast. After seeking the works of Malachi and his students for so long, now Malachi and the beast have sought out the spirit of Piety. Piety has become similar to one of the experiments she performed on so many exiles of Oria. She has been horribly mutated, but when we fight and kill her, she returns to her previous and familiar form. Piety tells us that Malachi's students, Chevron, Malagaro, and a witch named Duedre, were the ones to transform her. Piety, after being the victim of the type of experiments she herself performed, is now wanting to take down Malachi. While she reveres the power of the beast, she sees now that Malachi's vision is warped. She tells us that she does not regret what she sought to do, only how she did it. And she says, prior to meeting Malagaro, Chevron, and Duedre, I rather admired them. Their work, their accomplishments, sheer genius. As it turns out, genius is something better appreciated from afar. Deshret's spirit was also a puppet of Malachi's students, tortured continuously by them but never succumbing to their torture, hence remaining as a spirit rather than a monstrous recreation. We follow Piety into the harvest, getting close to the core of the beast. There are writings left by Malachi, and through them we find out Malachi had never wanted or needed Diala to sacrifice herself for the Rapture device to work. Malachi planned to enter the beast and control it on his own, and he wanted Diala to leave and escape the cataclysm he knew would happen. So he lied to Vol and Diala about his true intentions with the Rapture device. All of Malachi's work was leading to his entering and controlling the beast, the nightmare, the source of thaumaturgy in the world. Piety waits for us by the entrance to the Black Core, where Malachi resides. Apparently, Malachi has resurrected his 3 students to guard 3 of his organs. These organs are what
Holy
gives
shit.
Malachi immortality,
Okay, ich
rather
vielleicht so reinrennen, so gern hätte er überlebt.
Even though Vol killed and burned Malagaro and Duedre after the
Oh,
Purity
das machen wir.
Rebellion, and Chevron was killed by Brutus, Malachi was able to resurrect them for his purposes. We have already seen the works of Malagaro and Chevron, but there is the 3rd student we haven't yet encountered named Duedre. Duedre Darktongue was a spellcaster and student of the Inquisitor Malagaro. Malagaro himself removed Duedre's tongue, giving her the nickname Darktongue. Duedre may be the most sick and depraved of Malachi's students. She was interested in taking people apart to find the wonders of the universe, and used her own body for thaumaturgical experiments. Duedre was a fan of curses she appears as a horrifying, bloated apparition. We kill Chevron and Malagaro for the remaining organs, bring them to Piety to open up the Black Core and face Malachi. Malachi is the inspiration for Piety's pursuits, and the dire state of Ray class is due to the cataclysm Malachi caused. During Emperor Chittis Corandus' reign, Malachi was an ambitious thaumaturgist. He studied the works of the ancient Val alongside Isius Corandus, whose writings we recovered for Siosa in the Sarn Library. In these writings, Isius translated texts from Doryani of the Val, who spoke of the beast Malachi now resides within. Malachi was smart and manipulative, and his rediscovery of ancient knowledge and technology previously buried and forgotten swayed Chittis Corandus to the powers of thaumaturgy. It was Malachi who began the trend of implanting virtue gems into people, which spawned the Gemling Legion. Malachi convinced Emperor Chittis that not only would virtue gems make his army and citizens the most powerful and most eternal, but that his creations would be
Holy
ultra
shit,
loyal
das
to
ist
Chittis,
klar.
that the heart of each soldier beats in time with the heart of his emperor. If the emperor wishes that beat to stop, it stops. And this was true. For Malachi had implanted above Chittis' heart a virtue gem that would connect him to all of his Gemling Legion. This is why the majority of Gemlings turned into the Undying when Emperor Chittis was slain in 1334 during the Purity Rebellion. According to Malachi's own journals, the first time Malachi came in physical contact with a virtue gem, he began to have dreams where he spoke with the beast. He calls these dreams lessons cloaked in nightmare, and says these dreams are the source of all his ideas for thaumaturgical experiments. The beast has been given many names throughout history, including Beast, Nightmare, and Darkness. According to Tasuni, Malachi is the one who knew the beast's true name and understood its impenetrable nature. Malachi's ultimate pursuit was to control the beast because it is the source of all thaumaturgy. In Act 3, Grigor tells us, when Piety was experimenting on me, I met a presence. Intelligence, power, immensity beyond the limits of my pitiable mortal senses. I heard Piety speak to her lackeys of the beast. It is the source of her thaumaturgy and the object of her ambitions. I believe Piety's beast and that dark entity are one and the same. It would not be a stretch of reason to consider the beast the source of all malformation in Ray class. A secondary pursuit was to create Gemling, which is where Diala comes in. Since Malachi was the only one to understand the beast and know it was the source of thaumaturgy, he was able to convince Vol and trick Diala into believing that Malachi could and would kill the beast to end thaumaturgy. Malachi wants to remake the world in the image of Nightmare. Malachi, with the beast's power, is able to influence the outside world and has since the cataclysm. We enter the black core of the beast with Piety, who transforms multiple times between her original self and Malachi's nightmare version of her, under his control. Eventually she is killed, and we follow Malachi into the heart of the beast itself. Once we slay Malachi, it seems we have slain the beast as well. Such is their connection at this point. Perhaps Malachi sought immortality, but his decision to keep his organs, a sentimental mistake, allows us to kill him and the beast that has so long influenced the world with its power of nightmare. We return to Highgate, where we are congratulated by most on our bravery for killing the beast that caused the cataclysm. Everyone but Tasuni. While Tasuni tells us of a path to Oria that is opened on the mountaintop, he seems less than enthused at the death of the beast. With this foreboding in mind, we make our way to a portal to Oria. Thank you so much for watching. It's your boy Noodle. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this series, consider giving this video a like, subscribing, maybe even hitting that bell button.
Wusste ja hinterher.
If you want to see more videos, you want to vote on the next videos that are coming out after Acts 1 through 10, consider joining the Patreon as well. And if you have any questions, concerns, life stories, feel free to drop by my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/kitty@noodle. Schedule is on my Twitch page. And until the next one, stay sane, Exile.
Is that what's been eating our cattle?
Welcome back, Exile,
Ow.
to another video in Noodle's complete lore series. to
Ich bin
Oriath.
perfekt gedodged.
Let's get started.
Hab mich nicht getroffen, das war ein Bug.
At the end of Act 4, we travel to the top of Mount Veruso and find a large device called the Resonator that activates a portal to Oriath. This device was left by Dominus, and is how Piety and Dominus were able to travel between Rayclass and Oriath without raising suspicion. We enter the portal and end up in the slave pens of Theopolis, capital city of Oriath. As we heard from Maramoa in Sarn and Marikath of Highgate, Oriath has continued the Empire's tradition of enslaving the Karui, Marikath, and Exile. Oriath's slave enforcers attack us as we make our way through the pens. And we also see slaves who are friendly and also fighting as enemies. All across the ground you can see corpses and grates where hands desperately reach out to escape. A slave rebellion has begun. We fight our way through the pens until we come across Overseer Crow. When we kill him, a ladder is lowered from above, allowing us to escape the rebellion from the pens to the Overseer's Tower.
Destruction!
Overseer's Tower was once run by the Oriath who controlled and sold the slaves below, but it is now the refuge
Holy
of
shit.
a strange mixed group of
Oh!
survivors of the rebellion. Hiding in the tower are Utula,
Kann mich
Lonnie,
nicht
and
zutappen.
Valenta. Utula is a Karui who has been a slave in Oriath. He started the slave rebellion we just fought through in the name of the Karui god Kaba, who Utula calls the Tormented One. Utula says Kaba, the immortal slave, understands our plight like no other. In regards to the slaves he has rallied into
Warum
rebellion.
rennt er hier hin?
Lonnie is a half Karui, half Oriath woman. She was raised as an Oriath and not a Karui slave, but in this rebellion she sided with the Karui slaves and fought two overseers herself, which left her mortally wounded. Lonnie credits Valenta with saving her life. Valenta is an Oriath woman who specializes in medicine. She was actually experimenting on the Karui slaves before the rebellion. But when she saved Lonnie's life, Lonnie insisted that Valenta be allowed to live. Valenta and Piety worked for Dominus together. And Valenta says, Piety and I have devoted ourselves to the betterment of the human condition. As for our methods, Piety had a saying that summed it up nicely. Would you consider the feelings of the stones when constructing a glorious cathedral in the name of God? When Piety left the Ray class, Valenta was furious, as Valenta felt she had devoted her life and her work to Piety's vision. She created a tool called the miasmeter, which she used to keep an eye on Ray class, particularly Piety. Valenta tells us that through this instrument she heard the beast scream as it died, and she knows it was our doing. Valenta had to leave the miasmeter behind during the slave rebellion, and she wants us to retrieve it. Lonnie wants us to find and kill Justicar Casticus, the man who supplied Karui slaves to Valenta for her experiments. We leave the tower to the control blocks, which is where Valenta used to experiment on slaves. We travel through this maze of a slave pen and find Valenta's miasmeter, and also run into Justicar Casticus, who Valenta used to work alongside. Justicar Casticus is a member of the Templars, which High Templar Dominus used to lead. We kill Justicar Casticus and make our way out of the control blocks into the large open area of the Oriath Square, Center Theopolis. This square connects to every major area of Theopolis. These areas include the Templar Courts, the Cathedral, the Ossuary, and the Reliquary. The Templars have been their own power in Oriath since before the Purity Rebellion, but the founding of Oriath itself is unclear. A man named Templar Devaro, a contemporary under High Templar Dominus, studied artifacts brought from Rayclass to Oriath about the Val. Through his research, there is evidence that the Val were on Oriath as well. Before now, Oriath was untouched by the cataclysm that plagued Rayclass, but there has clearly been unrest. The death of High Templar Dominus seems to be a partial catalyst for this change, but something else seems to be motivating this rebellion. The Templar Courts and the Chamber of Innocence are the center stronghold for the Templars. The Templars are a religious order, and as we make our way through the courts to the inner chambers, we learn about their god, Innocence. Innocence is an ancient god, and in the Chamber of Innocence we read his origins on the ornate stained glass. Innocence and Sin are brother gods from the Mother of Two. The story says that Innocence listened to their mother and was rewarded for his virtuous nature. Sin stole and lied, and so Innocence told the mother that Sin was beyond rule and redemption, and Sin was burned to ash. Mankind breathed in the ash of Sin, and Sin took root in the bodies of men and women and children. Innocence swore to burn all traces of sin in the world. No matter where the ashes of sin fell, his purifying flames would rise to meet them. The Templar Order started when Innocence created a weapon called the Staff of Purity and bestowed it to the first High Templar, named Maximus. This weapon was part of Innocence himself and thus imbued with his essence. The Templars have worshipped Innocence and the idea of purifying mankind of sin ever since their inception. Both High Templar Vol and High Templar Dominus held the same seat, yet they had very different standards of purity. Vol, as we saw in his Purity Rebellion, believed all thaumaturgy was evil and planned to destroy the root of it. Dominus saw thaumaturgy as a way to become more powerful, to give himself and his followers the touch of God. At the end of the Chamber of Innocence, we meet the newly appointed High Templar, Avarius. The Tula tells us, with Dominus away in Rayclast, someone had to keep the wheels of oppression turning. Avarius was only too happy to take the job. It was Avarius who led some of the largest and most crippling raids upon the Namakanui. It was on his orders that men, women, and children were shackled and shipped like cattle to Theopolis. And it was Avarius who spent 5,000 lives building his Templar courts and his Chamber of Innocence, who had wives and daughters who scrubbed their husbands and fathers' blood from the stones so as to preserve their purity. We fight High Templar Avarius, who seems fanatic. When he falls, something similar to Dominus's transformation happens. Only this time Avarius does not turn into a vision of nightmare, he becomes a god.
Transcendent Mana.
While Utula and Valenta have hinted at this as we
So haben wir noch hier.
it is now clear. Somehow
Eine lange Ladezeit.
roam free. This is
den
the
Altar
cause of panic and uprising in Oriath. When Utula says
Triadisches Ritual.
he does not simply refer to the lessons of this old god. He has communion with the real Kitava. And naturally, Innocence, when reborn, goes to the Templars that worship him. Innocence chose High Templar Avarius and took over his body. Fighting Innocence is significantly more challenging than fighting Avarius, but upon his defeat, the aforementioned brother of Innocence, the god Sin, appears. We can now assume all gods in the lore of Rayclast and Oriath might be real. Unlike the Templars' writings about Sin, it seems that Sin is actually concerned for the well-being of mankind. Sin informs us that killing the beast has awoken all the gods. How does Sin know this? Because Sin is the creator of the beast. Sin created the beast specifically to keep the gods at bay in a deep slumber, the nightmare. This nightmare was powerful enough to keep all the gods asleep, but it also drew the attention of many power-seeking mortals throughout Rayclast's history. And here we thought we were saving the world by killing the beast. Or maybe Valenta was right, and we had no benevolent intentions in slaying the beast. Perhaps we are just killers and opportunists ourselves. Sin wants to see the gods of old subdued once more, and since we were able to slay Malachi and the beast, Sin tasks us with this, with promises of more power. After we defeat Innocence and meet Sin, we emerge from the Chamber of Innocence to find a man named Bannon, demanding we explain ourselves. Bannon was a former blackguard, as the Ebony Legion we have seen on Rayclast originates in Oriath under the High Templars. When we re-enter the Templar courts, everything is now on fire. The destruction of Innocence has allowed the other god present in Oriath to take over. He has marked himself all over the Templar courts with a red X, and his cultists run amok. This is Kitava, the Karui god that Tula had mentioned earlier, who Helm himself feared. When we return to the Overseer's Tower, Bannon is waiting for us, but Utula is missing. Lani informs us that Utula left as soon as Innocence was vanquished, claiming he was called by Kitava. Valenta tells us Innocence's Staff of Purity is a real weapon we can find in the ossuary, and that we should use it to defeat Kitava. Lani knows
81%.
ancient Karui artifacts in the reliquary, a place where holy relics are kept, and she believes we may learn more about Kitava there.
Oh,
The square is in ruins as well, covered in the blood and fervor of Kitava's cultists. We must traverse this ruined square to find the information and tools suggested to defeat Kitava. When we enter the square, we can hear Utula shouting to the followers of Kitava, yelling what seems like a sermon. Fun fact, Utula has his sermon of Kitava written down by Erwin of Theopolis into the Holy Book of Hunger, clearly in the style of religious texts, even calling himself High Priest Utula. Utula has been transformed by Kitava into Utula Stone and Steel. We defeat this monstrous vision of
was ist das für ein
Utula and
Scheiß,
continue
ey?
on to the reliquary.
Warum bin ich nicht einfach eingeloggt? Was ist das für ein Kackmist? Remember me, macht der Knopf irgendwas?
Three relics of the Karui gods. As we gather the Karui artifacts for Lani, we find writings about Kitava himself. The three entries chronicle the story of Kitava and Tukahama. To summarize, Aruhungai, daughter of the moon, wanted to have a feast for Tukahama returning from war with the first ones of the Ezamites. Tawa, son of the forest, gathered birds to be cooked for the feast. Kitava, the god of hunger, told Aruhungai he would watch the birds as they cooked, but instead he ate all of them. When Tukahama arrived, Aruhungai told what happened and asked for Kitava to be punished. Tukahama pulled out his tooth, one of the artifacts we find, and cut Kitava across the face in 2 diagonal strokes, blinding him and marking him with a large X, which we've seen symbolized in the Templar courts, and spoilers, we will see face to face later. To replace the birds Kitava ate, Tukahama and Valako, father of the storm, go fishing with Kitava. In the boat, Kitava eats all the bait for the fish. Valako takes off his own jaw, the second Karui artifact,
Naja,
and
ist ja
cooks
nicht so
Kitava,
doll, ne?
intending
Hat hier
to
schon
use
geil,
him
das
as
Ding.
bait for the
Oh,
fish
shit.
instead. At the bottom of the sea, Kitava eats all of the fish. When Tukahama and Valako pull him up, they decide Kitava needs ultimate punishment. They take Kitava to Hinakora, the mother of death. They ask Hinakora to kill Kitava so that he does not starve the rest of the Karui. Hinakora decides death is not the correct punishment, as a lesson needs to be learned. Hinakora beats Kitava with a whip made of her own hair, the third Karui artifact. She drives him to the underworld with her hair whip and leaves him to suffer without food or water for eternity. And that is where Kitava had remained, starving and tormented. That is, until we kill the beast and set the gods free. While this may seem like a fable intended to teach mortals a lesson, we can assume at least some of the tale is literal. The artifacts are real, and as we've seen, so is Kitava. Ossuary is a place where the bones of dead Oriath are placed. As we make our way through the maze of bones, we find the Staff of Purity. With knowledge of Kitava and the Staff of Purity, we make off for the cathedral to face Kitava. Kitava is on the roof of the Theopolis Cathedral. Kitava is a primal god like sin or innocence, unlike the mortals who became gods. He is the god of hunger. His punishment by the other Karui gods has inflamed his desire to consume. When Malachi spoke to Kaum through Nightmare, he told Kaum that the world was infested with Kitava's followers, and that Tukahama would give Kaum an offering to free his Karui from oppression. Haku, a Karui, believes that Kaum's vision to lead his Karui to Mount Verusa was actually Kitava's direction, bringing him to madness and turning Kaum into one of Kitava's slaves, like Utula. While Kaum's vision may have actually been a dream from Nightmare, a Karui interpretation, rather than Kitava's direct influence, it seems Kitava can truly corrupt and consume everything around him. Kitava's massive size and power seem an imminent threat to Oriath. Just like the beast before, we will attempt to defeat something that has been undefeated for centuries. We take Innocence's Staff of Purity and plant it like a banner to aid us in this fight. Kitava is insanely powerful, and halfway through the battle, the Staff of Purity is broken.
Toll.
And so are we. We fall to the ground, and Sin flies down to gather us before we are consumed by Kitava.
Oh, come on! Es regelt halt wieder Leben da.
Where a woman named Lily Roth offers to sail us back
Schon Nahkampf
Thank you
stimmt ja
so
immer.
much for watching It's Your Boy Noodle. If you
Alter,
haven't
war
watched
es
the rest of the
ätzend.
series, go ahead and check the playlist for those. If you are
Crap Gamers
interested
sein.
in voting for upcoming
Peak
videos with
Peak
some pictures
Crap
of the
Level
cat, think about
Peak
checking
Level
out
Crap
Patreon,
Gamers
and
sein.
of course, don't forget to
Holy shit.
like, subscribe, smash that bell button. If you have any questions about the series, feel free to check out my Twitch at twitch.tv/kittencatnoodle. And until the next one, stay sane, Exile. I thought we were done, but these exiles just keep returning to another video in Noodle's complete Path of Exile lore series. This video covers the Conquerors of the Atlas expansion. Let's begin. Conquerors of the Atlas, the most recent Path of Exile expansion, continues the story of Shaper and the Elder. But now, after defeating Kitava and beginning the endgame, Xana is not waiting for us in Oriath Square. Instead, we meet a man named Kirak. Kirak is actually looking for Xana and requests our help. Kirak was a military man on deployment, who returned to Oriath after the defeat of Kitava. Because of the fall of the Templars and the destruction from Kitava, Kirak and others have formed what is called the Citizen Vanguard, a task force intended to protect Oriath from future threats. He feels that the Templar kept the true nature of the world hidden from the populace, but now the Roa's out of the sack, and it is up to the people to protect themselves. However, upon returning to Oriath, Kirak learned that his younger brother Baran had disappeared. Baran was last seen embarking on an expedition with Caesarius and several skilled exiles, but has not returned. Kirak's work in the military focused on tracking, so he plans on tracking down Xana to find out what has become of his brother. He is concerned because he's heard that many who have worked with Xana have ended up 2 pews short of a congregation. He knows that she used to work out of the Templar laboratory, which is accurate, so that is where we first look together. When we enter the Templar laboratory, the map device we had previously been able to use is glowing. As we inspect it, the parts spin faster, the light grows, and it explodes. It's not for Kirak to decide whether skulking around Oriath with mystical technologies that explode is a crime worthy of prison, but this does evoke from him the best line in the game. By the muscular golden arse of innocence, what was that? Baron had spoken of map devices in his letters to Kirak. Now that this one is broken, Kirak will requisition a team of tinkerers and engineers, and, using the notes in this laboratory, construct a similar device. Our hideout will do nicely, and yes, Kirak knows about our hideout. He's a tracker after all. Kirak has heard a similar device was built for High Templar Venarius, who we know from my previous video on Shaper and the Elder is the High Templar who hired Valdo Caesarius to rebuild a map device found in Rayclast. This ended in the Elder being released and Valdo living in the Atlas to stop the Elder, becoming the Shaper himself. Kirak believes that the impossible components needed to make a map device work would likely be in the Vault of Venarius, located in the Reliquary. Dominus, the High Templar elected directly after Venarius, had declared his predecessor's pursuits heretical and had them sealed as
Farmland.
blasphemous.
Hier
A
noch
load
ein
of newer
Ritual, um das
secure secrets for
trojanische
himself,
Ritual.
no doubt. A man like him
Heal
would keep
yourself!
it close.
Mhm.
We go to the Templar court,
Stand kill
retrieve the
yourself.
vault key from Dominus's desk, and then head to the reliquary to open the vault of Venarius. We
Schon wieder
find the
Mitte, oder?
components we need to make a new map device and install it in our hideout. Kirak warns us to be careful as this
Oh.
map device should either work perfectly or explode. Based on what we've seen, it might even do both.
What is this?
Baron had sent drawings of maps, and Kirak is able to provide us a map to begin investigating Baran's disappearance in
Dude,
the
what the
Atlas.
fuck, ey?
After running a few maps, Baran will open a portal.
Dieses
to
Routine
our
ist so
map.
buggy, ey.
When we defeat
Wieder mal
boss of that
Kack-Games,
map,
ne?
Xana appears and scolds us. Do you have any idea what you've done? No one was ever meant to come back here. No one was ever meant to even know this place existed. Your brash stupidity may have just doomed everyone back home. After her lecture, we follow Xana through a portal to an abandoned citadel. Inside is a small area surrounded by space, similar to the Shaper's realm. This implies that this is an area of creation, a pocket in the atlas like Shaper used to manipulate realms. At the center is a watchstone altar. Xana tells us that they are trying to find their way back to Rayclast, and they've been building these altars as a means of escaping from the Atlas.
Something's definitely off.
We don't have all the pieces to this story yet, but we now know that Baran is still alive, in some form, but trapped in the Atlas, apparently with others. Xana follows us back to our hideout, and once there, tells us what has happened to lead to this moment. As we know, Xana had been forming groups of exiles for an expedition. She now explains, some time ago I took a group of exiles like yourself into the Atlas. Our task, to ensure a creature named the Elder never reached our world. Even though the exiles I recruited were adept combatants, the journey was difficult, yet we succeeded. So this group of exiles, including Baran, was hired by Xana to defeat the Elder. Some of you may be picking up on the meta commentary from GGG here. We too have once been exiles hired by Xana to defeat the Elder and save the world, and her father, the Shaper, from the Elder's decay. But Xana continues. We defeated the Elder, though we couldn't say we still succeeded. One member of the group did not survive the mission, but the person who was lost wasn't Baran. I thought we were done, but my companions just kept returning. Over and over again, they would enter the Atlas, wiping clean entire worlds. It wasn't about saving Oriath or discovery, it was just killing. This feels like GGG's way of poking fun at the power creep of players, and their desire for never-ending mapping. These exiles, reflections of us players, got more and more powerful and murderous, to the point that Xana saw no other choice but to destroy our only way out. I sealed us all in and waited for death to find us. Instead, I found you. So Xana locked these exiles, Baran included, in the Atlas. She saw their power and thirst for killing as a threat to the world. These exiles represent our past actions. Now we are tasked by Kirak with finding Baran in the Atlas, but also warned by Xana of the corrupting influence of the Atlas, and that we must not let these exiles escape it. We have the basics of our task, but what really happened to these exiles working with Xana? As we pursue Baran and the other exiles in the Atlas, we find their journals, and through these we can put together what actually happened. The group consisted of Baran, Veritania, Drox, Alhesman, and Cirrus, who became the leader of the group. Xana must not have revealed to this group what happened to the other groups, but Alhesman was suspicious, writing, Xana, hiding something important. Not sure what yet. Probably related to what happened to the previous group. Keeps checking on us. After some time, the group eventually found the Elder. Cirrus describes their first encounter in his second journal. I've done a fair bit of traveling in my lifetime, as smugglers tend to. I'd seen some strange sights. I thought I was as brave as they come. What I saw today shook me to my core. It emerged from nothing, like mist rising from the water's edge, accompanied by dozens of shapeless things. Its arms were tangled and many, its mouth an endless black abyss. I have never been more scared. Just being in its presence, I could feel my life being ripped away, dissolving like sugar in water. After seeing the abomination that is the Elder, the group felt determined to stop it from reaching Rayclast. Just like in the previous expansion, Xana's plan to defeat the Elder was to use a weapon her father, Valdo, had created to trap the Elder. When we retrieved this device in the past, Xana called it the Cosmic Arcana. With it, we can force the Elder from the map and into the abstract of non-reality. With this weapon, the group tracked down the Elder once more, apparently using the same method we had, finding the Elder within the Shaper's realm, where they may have even faced Uber Elder themselves. It's implied that the Shaper was present during their fight, that they had seen him before and knew his relation to Xana. So I believe their fight played out almost identically to our own Uber Elder fight. Almost. Baran's third journal has a complete account of the journey to trapping Elder and the aftermath. It reads, I know not how long we pursued the demon, long enough that my allies began to show signs of madness. We'd surely have fallen to the evil were it not for Sirius's courageous leadership and his sacrifice. We could find no way to slay the demon, though we tried countless times. It was the daughter of Valdo who found a way to seal it, though it cost poor Xana her father, rest his soul. Our gambit would have failed were it not for Sirius. The demon would not give in, clawing its way from Xana's device. Sirius, he leapt onto it. We saw the demon tap into his body, at last relinquishing its grip. Sirius and the demon spiraled into the trap and out of our reality, both gone. So Sirius is the
Na, wir gehen
exile who did
erstmal
not
den
survive
Wegpunkt
that
vielleicht.
Xana
Vielleicht kriege ich dann
alluded
direkt bei
to.
OK.
We see through the exile's journals
Farm
that
jetzt.
the group had bonded. Veritania wrote, for a brief time before we lost Sirius, I would have called these fellow exiles friends, perhaps even family. A certain bond forms between those who believe they are about to die. But we did not die. Sirius sacrificed himself, and we won the day. Xana and Sirius had become more than friends, in fact. Sirius wrote that, we have cornered our foe in the heart of the Atlas, confirming they fought the Elder in the Shaper's realm.
Very
My
good.
heart aches for Xana. Her father is caught in the center of this whole debacle, and I don't see any way he leaves this alive. We all realize these may be our last moments of life. If I survive after tomorrow, I'm going to tell her how I feel. It seems
So this
Sirius
is where
did
the
not
clan
have the
must
time
live.
to confess to
There are
Xana
far more
before
of them
his
than I
presumed
expected.
death. Sirius
Steel
sacrificed
yourself!
himself to make sure the Elder was being trapped. And although the Elder was successfully sealed away, this is not the end of their story. The exiles remained in the Atlas, as Xana told us, returning
Na, wir
many
müssen am
times
Rand,
to
glaube ich,
wipe
erstmal die
clean the
Rituale
entire
suchen, ne?
world. During this
Bevor wir
time,
das
the
Große
remaining
machen
members
müssen,
of the group
müssen
seemed to
können.
be
Ne?
going mad. I'll describe each member of the group
Kultist
and their
Twitch, auf
individual
was?
descents into
Armageddon.
madness, but the group's behavior was
Ei,
more
ei, ei, ei.
Xana. And at some point, Sirius returned. According to Baran, then Sirius was there once more. None of us witnessed his return. His eyes did not move, he did not blink, and his mutterings, mad, unceasing. Then his face contorted in ways I'd seen only from men possessed by the Black Spirit. He struck at us again and again. We could not restrain him. We had to flee that place. That is when we discovered our path home was sealed.
Ein
Valdo's
Regal
daughter
dort.
sabotaged our return. I do not know how long we have been trapped here. Weeks, at least. Probably years. Time in the Atlas is a mirage. From Baran's description, Sirius seems possessed by the Elder. Perhaps being trapped in the cosmic arcana together, they fused somehow. It's hard to tell how much of Sirius is left in this returned version of him. Is he simply a shell? Has the Elder taken all his memories like he did High Templar Venarius? Or is Sirius using the Elder and is now more powerful, but still himself? And this is where we come in. Xana had been keeping these exiles, including the returned Sirius, inside the Atlas to protect Rayclass from their growing madness and hunger for power. Chirac, only knowing that his brother had disappeared, asked us to find Baran, created a map device for us to enter the Atlas, and now we have potentially put the world at risk. So we must stop these exiles from returning to our world.
Ah,
Before looking at
What?
each individual, let's discuss the nature of the Atlas. After all this, Xana now believes that the Atlas itself has awful powers, where before she believed the corruption and madness that destroyed her father were all from the Elder. Xana says, there are times when I feel like the Atlas is watching me, observing me, and offering me a
Right.
glimpse of my
Finn.
desires to keep me
Finn
coming
ist da.
back.
Go, Finn.
It's as
Do
though
your
the
thing.
deeper into it I explore, the more it
Ah.
wraps itself around my mind. And the remaining exiles had experienced this as well, being fed visions of their greatest desires, pulling them deeper into the Atlas to pursue them. Veritania in particular was adept at noticing the power of the Atlas. In her first journal, she writes that this so-called Atlas makes me uneasy. When the Elder and the Shaper fought for dominion, there was a known purpose behind the miscreation fought. Now that those purposes are gone, these lands have reverted to a primordial, malleable clay, which seems to offer up our every desires as offering and appeasement. It seems the Atlas, without the war between Shaper and Elder to configure itself to, was now attempting to mimic what the exiles would desire. Veritania continued, "A pure being might think this is paradise, but we are mortal and brimming with vices. Desire is the true enemy." Veritania was suspicious of the Atlas's malleability, writing, "I know not how many days pass, for the sun is false in this place. I suspect each valley I tread has a sun only because I expect it to be hanging in the sky. Does each valley only have a sky because I expect that, too? I no longer believe anything at all." But rocks saw opportunity within this malleability, proclaiming, "Each valley I secure adds to the width and breadth of my lands, yet when I return they seem populated by phantasms and twisted imaginings once more. Yet I find that the mists hearken to my expectations in subtle ways as my strength grows. Perhaps I can control this realm with greater finesse as my might becomes unquestionable." Regardless of their initial stance on the Atlas, all eventually fell prey to the whims of it. Xana tells us, "To dwell there is to leave yourself vulnerable to unspeakable madness. It's inescapable and insidious. It taps into your greatest desires, offering you a glimpse of what might be, and that temptation, it's all I could do to stop myself from falling into the same patterns as my friends." First, we will look at Baran, Kirak's younger brother, and a former Templar. He was exiled, but still remained faithful to his belief in innocence. He went on this mission with Xana to protect his fellow exiled Templars, writing in his first journal, "To my brothers and sisters of the Templar faith in exile, Hercules, Gomen, Cassia, and Landon, I bequeath to you my home in Oriath, that you might never be without one again." Perhaps he was exiled because he was a gay man, and his lover was the last person mentioned, Landrin. His second journal reads, "My dearest Landrin, how I wish I could have spent but a few more moments with you, and felt your hand in mine just one more time. Fate has seen to it that, like our days in the court, duty must come before desire. Know that I did it all so that you might be safe. I hope you find happiness." After defeating the Elder, Baran wanted to establish the Templar faith, at least belief in innocence, within the Atlas. But he was tormented by the return of Cirrus, who seemed to have some power, either from
Dude!
the Elder or from the Atlas, to manipulate.
Geht in den Kreis, ihr
The group had
Lappen.
been slowly
Toll, sind die alle
breaking
draußen
apart as
gestorben.
each person began pursuing their own vision. But Cirrus was
Fucking
following
GGG.
Baran.
What
It
bullshit.
was inescapable. Even when we splintered, his voice wrapped around our heads like a snake, squeezing every other thought into warped shapes. I could not hear God's whispers with such constant noise. I dare not visit him now. I want only to escape this prison and punish that insolent blasphemer, Caesarius, and her foolishness. 2 notes. Baran says they splintered, which might refer to the group separating, but could mean something else. The Atlas does allow strange powers, so possibly they were manipulating space, reality, or themselves into splinters. Second, it seems Baran went to visit Cirrus after his return
Ja,
with
ihr scheint nur noch der
someone
King
else,
of
or multiple people. After the return
Mist
Cirrus
zu sein.
attacked them, some members of the group still visited him. But who? I'm not sure. As
Dude,
Xana insists,
leave me
she knew of
alone.
Cirrus'
What the
return.
fuck, ey.
Baran was the last person to
Manche von
lead
denen sind so
Xana's
fucking
group.
annoying.
Xana tells us that she was fond of Baran, and they bonded over mutual distaste for dominance. Even if Xana tended to agree with Veritania's secular views, Baran was still a firm believer that trust in God was necessary for good moral judgment. Despite everything the Templar put him through, his faith was unshaken. In their last exchange before Baran left, he accused Xana of being a shadowy demon meant to draw him away from the righteous path. Baran became Baran, the Crusader. Veritania, as Xana mentioned, was a secular woman, who initially appeared the most level-headed and humanitarian of the group. She was exiled for her charity work. Helping one too many mistreated Mariketh or Karui made powerful people in Oriath very angry. Once on their mission, Veritania used her intellect to guide the group, and her kindness to soothe their arguments and concerns. She was the first to pick up on the realities of dwelling in the Atlas. She compared it to a time long ago, before I was exiled. I wandered a hall of mirrors at a carnival in
Weiß nicht, ob du
Theopolis.
sterben werde.
I saw myself reflected into infinity, finally obscured not by any horizon, but by the darkening and shrinking of my own image as it grew more and more distant behind echoes of itself. The mists of the Atlas are the
Ja, what the fuck war das denn? Ich war nicht auf den Blumen drauf. Was haben die für einen insane AOE, ey?
reflected as countless echoes of vast and immeasurable space. While Veritania
Muss ich jetzt?
may
Nee,
not have
muss nicht
had
noch machen.
the
Das wäre noch geiler. Wenn ich keinen anklicken.
to manipulate her. She grew disdain for the others and their pursuits for power. We are drifting apart. Each of us sees that which we desire on the formless horizon, and each of us pursues our own path. I saw Baran continuing his crusade
Das ist viel
in a righteous
weniger.
wrath. I would not call myself bitter, but I do see the others descending, while I
Aua.
remain steadfast in my convictions. Drox believes he can forge a new land here with himself as king. Al-Hezmin seeks to hone his skills against even more dangerous enemies in a vain attempt to be more powerful than Drox and Baran. They are all becoming disgusting. She began seeing herself as the only pure one, the only one capable of resisting the Atlas's whims. I understand now. I must serve as the moral heart of this place. The others have become naught but delusional addicts lost in a haze of indulgence, and the thought of them makes me nauseous. The pure require strength to impose order on a chaotic world, and I cannot allow the likes of Al-Hezmin or Drox to spread their filthy vices.
Oh nein.
Like the Templars,
Komm nicht weg.
Veritania began thinking that the only way to save the world was to purify it, which meant purging it. In her fourth journal, she writes with great agitation, "Do you not see how repugnant you are? Stop consuming, stop partaking, and look at the abomination you have become. Every morsel you stuff down your gullet and every lie you tell yourself just makes you that much more monstrous. You are changing. You are misshapen. Do you not see yourself? I shall save you from your own vices by purging your weakness." According to Xana,
Oh no,
Veritania
Phase
was the
2,
third
dieser
person
ein fieses Todesmonster.
after
Oh
accusing
no.
Xana of using the mysteries of the Atlas as a drug to distract herself from the loss of her father.
Oh, was?
Veritania became Veritania, the Redeemer.
So?
Veritania left the group because Drox had left, and Drox was the only one who could meet Veritania's increasingly high standards. Drox was a warrior, and although Cirrus was their leader, Drox would lead the group in combat. He was initially haughty but kind, and Xana says he led us through numerous situations we thought fatal with an unflagging warm grin that let us know he believed in us. Drox saw potential in the Atlas
Nein.
even before Madness
Nein.
walked in, as a place where he could
Ah,
establish
das ist
a
so schlimm.
kingdom of law and justice, free from the rule of the Templars. No more will we have to fear those in power, for I shall be the one who leads, and by my strength the law will be equal and fair for all. They will be free, and I will be their lord, ruling by the people's respect for rather than through fear or religion. Drox had visions of grandeur in his first journal.
Nein, oh come on.
His fourth journal
Das ist so
was
lech,
fully
diese
invested.
fucking
The
Bullshit-Fähigkeit
people
da.
hail their king. They cheer for the awe and power of my reign as I fell enemy after enemy in a blaze of golden glory. I shall never rest, so that my people may fill the valleys of the Atlas and prosper. They will know me as they know the sun, shining
Wait,
on them
krieg ich
as
noch
I
Schaden hier?
pass in a
Nee.
golden blaze. As Drox
Oh komm,
began
oh,
pursuing
warum bin ich
his
immer
vision,
voll, wenn
his
sowas hier
demeanor
kommt, ey,
changed.
oh no.
Xana recalls,
Wie haben wir
at
denn?
some point, almost
1073?
imperceptibly, Drox stopped making decisions for the group and started focusing only on his new dream. His smiles turned to scowls. He remained fixated on this mad idea of building a kingdom in the Atlas. His obsession was putting us in danger, and that is something I could not tolerate. When I led the group away from him, he either didn't notice or didn't care. Drox became Drox, the warlord. The fourth exile in this group was Al-Hezmin. Al-Hezmin was an excellent tracker and hunter, and acted as the survival guide. He took notes as they progressed through the Atlas, such as, the old man, Xana knows him, grandfather, mentor. Either way, he doesn't seem to recognize her. Impressive powers, must be careful around him. And Cirrus, quiet, but when he does speak, he speaks with authority. Likes Xana, definitely something going on there. His skills allowed the group to survive the ever-shifting Atlas. As Xana says, when you spend as much time in the Atlas as we did, basic survival skills no longer suffice, and it becomes necessary to master the lay of the land. That's a tall ask in a place where the land changes from day to day, and yet Al-Hezmin took to it like a roa to mud. Al-Hezmin saw himself as the most skilled hunter in the group, and his madness centered around proving himself as the best. In his third journal, he wrote, "Yesterday, I hunted a boar for the group. Today, Drox brought back 2. Tomorrow, I'll bring back 3. Show that loud idiot that I'm the top hunter." Most of his ire was directed at Drox, who he saw as his biggest competition for being the most capable after Cirrus's disappearance. Al-Hezmin was the first to leave the group, but it was actually because Xana had the others sneak away from him in the night. In battle, he had to deal the flashiest and most devastating blows, and he had to make sure we all saw him do it.
Sorry, these are
His
just some
fixation
odds and
on
ends of
honing
life.
his skills was actually quite useful during our campaign against the Elder, but it hollowed him out in some fundamental way. He was full of bravado, and yet at the same time desperately afraid of being exposed as merely second or third best. He was never unkind to me, even as the madness crept upon him, but for capable warriors like Drox that threatened his self-image, a clash was inevitable. We slipped away in the dead of night, but I doubt we've escaped a man of his talents. Al-Hezmin became Al-Hezmin, the hunter. The final exile was Cirrus, their leader, who had sacrificed himself to save the others
Oh,
and
cool.
seal
Das
the
ist
Elder,
eigentlich sich jetzt
but has
erst.
now
Hat der es
returned
nur?
in the
Ja.
Atlas. Cirrus was a smuggler and explorer. From his journals, he seemed kind, strong, and empathetic. His first journal reads, "I hate this place. I hate what it makes us do. I don't want to be in charge of these people because I don't believe we will survive this, and it will be my
Hab
fault."
ich schon die.
Even though Cyrus had his concerns,
Hä?
his feelings for Xana trumped them. He felt that his life before was
Ach,
purposeless,
hey, wieso sind die
but
da
now,
oben jetzt?
after encountering the Elder, he saw his purpose. If it weren't for Xana, I'd probably still be miserable. I'll do it for her. Before the final battle with the Elder, Cirrus wrote that he would confess his feelings to Xana after the fight, but he had to sacrifice himself instead. There are journals from after his return to the Atlas, where he recounts what happened to him. In Cirrus's fourth journal, he writes, "I remember seeing a light swallowed in an orb of darkness, suspended. I remember its hands reaching out for something to hold. Desperation. I remember stepping forward. I wasn't thinking of myself or of
Feel
Orion.
my wrath!
I was was thinking of my friend and of my brothers and sisters whose lives depended on me. I remember its cold grip tightening. Then I slipped away. I remember glass, encased in glass. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, but I could see everything. I saw everything. I saw everyone. Saw them leave. Saw her leave. It was all so quick. 1,000 days and nights passes in a flash. Then, nothing. I felt nothing. No sadness or anger, no joy, no pain, no pleasure. I was free. Free to move, to go where I please. Free of desire. Free to see the universe for what it was. Empty. Cirrus seems to have lost all feeling. For Xana, for the others, for the world. Whether the Elder possessed him or Cirrus gained the Elder's powers, now he is pursuing the others and driving them further into madness. Now he is Cirrus, the Awakener. Defeating the Elder could not save the exiles from the corruption of the Atlas. One by one, they dwindled from the group. It seems Xana lost everyone inside the Atlas before the group had entirely disbanded. As Baran wrote in his second journal that, it seems we may never leave this strange place. Our guide claims the device we used to come here has been broken and cannot be fixed, and that it would take a miracle for a path home to open. It's unclear whether Cirrus appeared before or after the group completely disbanded, because Xana claims to have not known of his return. But the exiles still within the Atlas, at least Baran, have been affected by him, and Baran implied that he was with other people when Cirrus returned. At this point, it's hard to entirely trust Xana's recollection. If Kirak knew that Xana's former exile went mad, wouldn't Xana have known? Been on these expeditions before, wouldn't the others' madness have manifested in similar ways? Did Xana know
What the
Cirrus had
fuck,
returned, but tried to hide it from us? And what does she plan
Nerves
to
is
do to us
bullshit.
if we don't
Holy
follow
shit.
her instructions or meet her expectations? Kirak himself has his doubts, saying, so that's it then. Baran can't be saved. Caesarius, did she understand the costs? Did she know the fate she was consigning my brother to? But Baran seems to believe Xana did the right thing. When we meet and defeat Baran for the first time, he drops something called a watchstone. Before he disappears after the fight, he says, Kirak sent you? You must keep him out of the Atlas. I cannot be safe. He will only find his own doom. He will end up like me. Tell Xana she was right to seal us away.
I've nowhere to keep
Cirrus
that.
must never be. Which supports Xana's decision. Xana explains what the Watchstone is and how we might use it. Superficially, it resembles a virtue gem, but I don't think that's quite what it is. When Xana and her exiles sealed the Elder in her father's cosmic arcana, some of my father's memories were expelled, along with those of the Elder's countless other victims. These stones are what's left of the Elder's victims, crystallized and concentrated. To hold one is to hold countless lives in your hand, to fill your mind with a maddening mix of sounds and images and emotions. Perhaps the watchstones are the cause of the voices Baran was hearing. Like virtue gems, these stones have souls or memories trapped inside them. With their power, we can unlock deeper realms within the Atlas to find the exiles, who Xana now calls the Elder Slayers.
What have we got? Here's
But
what I
Xana
got.
does not trust us to handle the watchstones ourselves. They are intoxicatingly powerful. It took all my willpower to lift my hand from the stone and step away. I can't in good conscience let you take them, but that doesn't mean we can't use them in our fight against the Elder Slayers. Xana fears we will end up like the Elder Slayers if given access to this power. Perhaps there is a link between their madness and their access to these watchstones. But if the madness is from the Atlas itself, are we really safe? And with Xana's long exposure to the Atlas and her use of the watchstones, is she? Once we've gathered 20 watchstones by finding and defeating the 4 Elder Slayers, Oran, Veritania, Drox, and Alhezmin, Cirrus appears. Xana exclaims, "No! Cirrus is still alive? Gods, I thought he was dead. You took the brunt of the energy released when we sealed the Elder. How did he survive?" Again, it's hard to tell if she's truly surprised. Kirak joins us and Xana as we pursue Cirrus. Xana tells Cirrus she wants to help him, which echoes her exchange with Shaper in the past. He responds, "Destroying you is as easy as flicking a pest," and attempts to harm Xana, but Kirak steps in the way. Cirrus continues, "You want the Atlas? Take it. But Oriath?
Wie heißt
Oriath,
das?
I will burn
Grundtyp von
ground.
denen?
Perhaps the suffering of my fellow citizens will stir something." Cirrus then turns and disappears into a portal to Oriath. We pursue him and fight him and his raging storms in the Oriath Square, as if Theopolis hasn't seen enough destruction. After a grueling fight, we defeat Cirrus, who admits, "At least I felt something." But Theopolis is in ruins. Afterwards, we meet up with Kirak and Xana, along
Ja,
with
die
others
soll ich
who
öfters
populate
mitnehmen.
the Oriath Square in the new epilogue. a tiny
Schon ziemlich
island
viel
off
verpasst,
the
glaube ich.
coast of Pelago. Xana is
Weil ich einfach weiß, dass ich
Atlas
ignoriere.
Oriath and Cirrus. Kirak tells us that his citizen vanguard started an evacuation from Oriath to this Karui island, noting that it's no small irony that the Oriathan people now depend upon the Karui we once enslaved. I always said that if you kick a Roa in the arse, one day it'll kick you in the head, but I underestimated the honor of our new host. It seems for now that things have settled. Perhaps this is a new beginning. Perhaps we can settle here, stay in one place for a change. But is anything ever really over? Xana asks us, "But at least you're done now, right, Exile? You'll leave the Atlas alone, right?" Another meta question from GGG, as we all know no one stops mapping after they've beat Endgame. And Kirak is still suspicious of Xana, saying, "I'll keep my counsel on the topic of Xana, thank you." However, it seems someone reported to the magistrates that she's innocent of all her supposed underhanded activities. Funny, that. So Xana is still not claiming any responsibility for what has transpired, and at least in this instance, is feigning ignorance. Notably, Sin and Innocence have not joined us on this new Karui island. Perhaps Innocence has finally taken his trip south that he discusses with Sin after we defeat Kitaba in Act 10. Perhaps this Karui island is the starting point for PoE 2, as it's a new location not under the rule of the Templars. But as I mentioned in my video on the Ezamites, the PoE 2 trailer mentions the first ones, who are Ezamite gods. The Karui have no love for the Ezamites or their gods, and neither does Kirak. Will there be a connection between the conquerors of Atlas?
Nein, toll.
Where have Sin and Innocence gone? Are they together? And why? And is there
Vermut.
really such a thing as too much killing in the Atlas? Many noticed with this expansion, when Xana asks us if we are still sane, Exile, it is with a much more pointed tone. Xana has already punished our past incarnations in the form of the trapped and maddened conquerors stuck in the Atlas. I wonder how long Xana will tolerate us. Thank you so much for watching. It's your boy Noodle. If you enjoyed this video, there's a playlist linked in the description of more videos like this one. The next video will be on Betrayal, as voted on by my patrons. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions about lore, feel free to drop by my Twitch stream or leave a comment here. Even if I'm not playing PoE, I'm always down to talk some lore. But please, if you feel your sanity slip away, you need to tell me. Until the next one, stay sane, Exile.
Crush them!
welcome back Exile to another installment in Noodle's complete lore series. This video covers Act 6. Let's get started. At the end of Act 5, Sin saves us from Kitava and flies us to the docks of Oriath, where we meet a new character named Lily Roth. Lily Roth offers to sail us to Rayclass to escape Oriath and Kitava. Lily takes us to Lionized Watch, where our adventure began. Lily Roth is a pirate, although she prefers the term nautical entrepreneur. She is the granddaughter of the infamous pirate Whalem Roth. She has made a name for herself as well. The bandits Creighton, Alira, and Oak from Act 2 were all working with Lily to recover an ancient map when the three of them were caught and exiled to Rayclass. Lily seems to know many of the characters we have previously met. She has quite the history with Tarkley from Act 1 and now Act 6. Tarkley and Lily Roth used to work together as smugglers and lovers. But Lily suspected that Tarkley was developing some deep feels, like wanting to settle down and have children. So, Lily left him tied up on Penance Quay to be captured. This is how Tarkley was exiled to Rayclass. Bestel has never met Lily Roth, but he knows of her because he is a huge fan of pirates like Captain Fairgraves and Whalem Roth. Bestel is incredibly happy to see Whalem's granddaughter in Lionized Watch. Tarkley, not so much, but Nessa is nowhere to be seen. Even though we were thoroughly defeated by Kitava, Sin tells us that there is a way to destroy Kitava still. Since Sin created the beast, he has intimate knowledge of it, and claims that the beast still remains in some sliver of its former self. The beast's downfall was being connected to Malachi, who left remnants of his mortality
Ah, die
in the
Hütte.
form of
Da ist
organs.
die Laute drin.
However, these ties to
keinen
mortality
Platz für
to
die, glaub
Malachi
ich.
will now allow us to revive the beast. Malachi resurrected his three students, Chevron, Malagaro, and Doedre, to guard Malachi's organs. These three organs were represented in the Act 4 Malachi fight by the three bleeding hearts we destroyed. Now, Sin believes we can restore some of the beast's power, what had kept Kitava and the other gods at bay for centuries, by restoring these three hearts with three souls. It seems fitting that those three souls should be the same three who guarded the organs previously. Sin senses that Chevron's spirit has returned to the prison after the beast's death. Tarkley tells us he saw Nessa run out at night to the mudflats, and when he called to her, she did not respond. She was too quick to catch, but Tarkley followed her tracks until they simply vanished. Besides Nessa going missing, the fall of the beast seems to have worsened the situation for Lionized Watch. The dead from shipwrecks have washed up and begun terrorizing the Watch, and while the enraged animals are mostly gone, they have been replaced by strange monsters and humanoids. Lily asks us to kill the undead who are rising on the Twilight Strand as our payment for her sailing us to Oriath. Bestel, in an attempt to bring cheer to the remaining survivors, wants us to find his body manuscript he lost in the Mary Gulch shipwreck. Tarkley wants us to find Nessa. The undead Oriath that have washed ashore look relatively unchanged, but farther north on the coast and the mudflats are monsters that look like risen Karui with long arms made out of weapons. These monsters are called Tukahama's scouts, warriors, or vanguards. Since the Karui god Kitava is alive, and Kitava's cultists run rampant in Oriath, it makes sense that other gods and their followers have risen as well. As we search for Nessa in the mudflats, we see a new gate blocking our way to an area called the Karui Fortress. We find the key to opening this gate by killing a unique Tukahama scout called the Dishonored Queen. Editing Noodle here, I just want to address that some people believe that the Dishonored Queen we see is Queen Kiri. This is supported by the fact that she is called a queen and because she shoots arrows. However, I could not find any concrete evidence to support this, as Kiri was traveling back to Namakanui with the rest of the Karui last time we heard about her from Labianja and Cal's writings in Acts 1 and 4. And we've seen people come back to Rayclass, i.e. Duresso, but these were as spirits brought back by the power of Nightmare, and obviously the beast is no longer around. So I just wanted to address that, although I couldn't find any concrete evidence and didn't want to include it unless I could find something to prove that she is in fact Kiri. This key is called the Eye of Conquest. This name is reminiscent of Kaum's Eye of Fury from Act 4, but its flavor text as a prayer to Tukahama. Weakness must be purged, lest it poison the blood of all Karui. Behind the dishonored queen, we find Nessa partially in the cave by the waterfall that led to the submerged passage. She is mostly submerged in the water, now flooding the cave once again. Nessa tells us that the King of Brine did this to her, and that he wants something from her. She seems to have broken some form of mind control to warn us about this Brine King. She clutches her hand to her chest while she tells us this, and then suddenly dives into the water headfirst, revealing that she's been turned into a gosh dang mermaid. Fun fact, right before Nessa dives into the water, she moves her hand and we can see she is wearing a very familiar necklace, as certain other fishy lady wore in Act 1, the Star of Breakglass.
Destruction!
With Nessa's second disappearance, we continue on past the gate to the Karui fortress. In the middle of the area, we find what looks like an arena. Upon entering it, we are greeted by Tukahama himself, the Karui god of war. We've discussed Tukahama briefly when mentioning Kaum in Acts 1 and 4, because Kaum was a fervent follower of the ways of Tukahama. As we learned in Act 4, before Tukahama, the Karui were peaceful farmers and fishermen. Now, the Karui are known for being fearsome warriors, so Tukahama has great influence over the Karui. Under Tukahama's leadership, the Karui began many wars and conquests, specifically against the first ones of Hezimir, which, fun fact, are the bestiary bosses or spirit
Ogam's
beasts.
farmlands.
So, Sakawal, Kracian, Venomous, and Ferul. Sin tells us, battle by battle, war by war, Tukahama carved the steps that would carry him up a mountain of severed heads and into immortality. This implies Tukahama was once immortal, and ascended to a god through his actions, unlike the primal god Kitava. When we defeat Tukahama, Sin appears. He draws some power from Tukahama's body and tells us that we can use the power of the gods we defeat to strengthen ourselves. These powers appear in our pantheon. Tukahama is the first god we have encountered since Kitava, but he will be one of many that we may defeat and gain pantheon powers from. Fun fact, the word pantheon means all the gods of a people or religion collectively, so it's basically a Pokedex of god powers we will be able to use. From the Karui fortress we access the ridge, which is a familiar path to the Axiom prison where Chevron has returned. Chevron's spirit has returned to the prison because Brutus was always her finest work, and her restless spirit was drawn back to this place to continue her experiments. We make our way through the prison to the rooftop. Chevron waits for us on the roof, now in the form of Chevron the Returned. We catch her working over Brutus's strapped-down corpse. She reanimates Brutus and we fight him. Then we fight Chevron, and both fights are very similar to their original counterparts. In the final phase, Chevron merges with Brutus to become the dreaded Chevrutus and gives her lightning magic to his powerful slam. Fun fact, this form is not actually named Chevrutus. It's named Reassembled Brutus, which is lame. When we slay Chevrutus, Sin is able to extract Chevron's soul for our purposes of restoring the beast.
Hey, was das für ein scheiß Map-Design schon wieder?
Although we must eventually follow the path forward, if we travel down the slopes of the area, we find a new side area called the Valley of
Oh shit, kommt der?
Inside is another minor god, Abarath, who is a giant goat man. Abarath is not a Karui god like Tukahama or Kitava. His national origins are unknown. When Abarath was a man, he was an alchemist known as the Scarlet King. Abarath would take goats and burn away the flesh to liquidate the life force within, and would consume this liquid. That is how he turned into the first goat man. Every goat man we have seen in the world thus far originated from Abarath, now known as the Cloven One. Abarath stole a woman to mate with, and all of his children and children's children are these goat men, including Fawn, the large goat man who kept Navali captive in Act 1. Every goat man must steal a woman to father more goat men, which is quite a terrible fate. We kill Abarath, the Cloven One, and can utilize his power in our pantheon. Because we opened the thaumaturgical
Was haben wir denn
piety between
hier?
Act 1 and 2, We can now travel directly from the prison into the western forest, where Alira once resided. We run straight through the western forest into the riverways.
Nix.
While our main quest lies further north still, we can go to
Ah,
the
oh,
wetlands where Oak
Handbook
used
auf
to
der Karte
reside to
suchen.
find another god that has risen. The creatures residing in the wetlands have been infected with a parasite spread by this god, named Rizlatha, the puppet mistress. Rizlatha, the puppet mistress, is an Asmiri god. Before Rizlatha was a god,
Oh.
she was the leader of a large and peaceful Asmiri tribe.
Together.
Her tribe was attacked and destroyed by none other than Tukahama, the Karui god of war. Many of the tribe's people killed were Rizlatha's own children. Rizlatha wanted to revive her slaughtered tribe, and in
Oh
her
my
rage
God, das
and
ist so gut.
desperation became a parasitic bug capable of spawning many mindless children to repopulate and take over the area. Her influence is spreading
Was haben wir
as
eigentlich
she
jetzt
can not
gerade
only
drin?
create children
Wir haben
but can turn other creatures into her
Close
children.
Combat,
We
Inspiration
find
und
her nest,
Brutality.
slaughter her children once more, and kill Rizlatha, the puppet mistress, to
Ah,
add
komm.
her power to our
Kurz da,
pantheon.
alles weg.
We continue through the riverways and find that the forest encampment entrance has been blocked off. But we can go south to the southern forest,
War schon
where
alles
we
durchsucht
entered
hier?
Act 2 after
Glaube ja.
killing Mervale. Eventually, we find the entrance to the cavern of anger, where Mervale was living. When we go inside, we see Nessa
Mit
in
Luck
full mermaid form,
haben wir
sitting
Luck.
on a rock in front of a flag chest. When we open the chest, the black flag is
Wieso
inside.
können wir das nicht mehr? Warum ist
Nessa
das so
tells us that
rot?
the Brine King's time has almost come and Nessa must go to him.
Hä?
But the black flag before us was once the flag of Whalem Roth's ship, the Black Crest. Nessa tells us that we can put this flag in the beacon to summon Whalem Roth, who can take us to
I'm
where
not
the Brine
strong
King
enough.
and Nessa now
Ah,
reside.
muss mit 3
We can now
multipliziert
clearly
werden.
see the star of Rayclast around Nessa's neck.
Ey, what the
Nessa dives into
fuck?
the water behind her once more, and we make our way through
Jo,
the
das ist
giant
insane,
system
ne?
to
Holy
a
shit.
beach. We travel
110
along the beach
Stärke,
until we
ey.
find the giant beacon that Nessa told us about. We light the beacon and toss in the flag, which turns the beacon's light dark red and brings darkness to the surrounding area. A large black ship appears below, which can only be the Black Crest that Whalem Roth captained. Whalem Rottooth is Lily's
Oh, warte.
grandfather, as we know. Whalem, although dead, seems to have been taken by a curse similar to Captain Fairgrave's.
Wait,
A
warte.
spirit changed into his own ship, and he must serve us
Boah, ich bin so
because
dumm,
we
was ist
summoned
hier
him.
los?
When Whalem was alive, he was a Brine Rot warband leader and captain of the Black Crest.
Ah, mir
It is
ist
said
sowas
that
hier
the
lieber
hull of
als
this
das
ship is made of the bones of a
Alchemie
Leviathan Whalem
Dingsbums.
killed. Whalem's own sister, Lucy the Rot Mother, betrayed him and left him on an island so she could lead his warband. Whalem lost much of his infamy from that incident, and the Brine Rot pirates became more crazed than notorious. To regain some status, Whalem attempted to kill Mervale and died. Somehow, his spirit is still attached to his ship. Whalem sails us out east to a place called the Brine King's Reef. The area is infested with undead Brine Rot pirates, possibly those sacrificed to the Brine King for many years.
Der
We have
Executioner.
found warnings of the Brine King scattered throughout Act 6, beyond what Nessa has mentioned. Lily tells us that all pirates used to drown mutineers during the full moons to appease the Brine King, and Whalem confirms this tale. On the Twilight Strand, we find a message in a bottle from First Mate Pickett, detailing how his ship, manned by Captain Caruso, was overtaken by a large wave that covered the ship in crabs. The green light came from the sea as the
Arcanist
crabs
Edger.
destroyed and ate any sailors they could reach. As
Der
the crew
Fletcher.
tried to escape on longboats, Picken saw the Brine King himself, who overturned the ship. Picken wrote this message in a bottle, knowing the ship and its crew were doomed. At the beacon, we find the Templar report written by General Markovius.
Man muss ja Bock mal Mönch zu
Markovius
spielen,
writes
würde ich
to
sagen.
Avarius, entreating that Avarius stopped sending
bisschen
ships
so
out to catch
dynamischer.
Brine pirates, as the
Nicht
Brine
so
King was
passiv hier.
destroying all the ships.
Jetzt habe ich Minion und
Both of
den
these
hier
reports
gespielt,
are from recent
weil
events.
es wirklich lassen, wo man nicht so viel macht.
The Brine King is also known as Soagoth. The ancient map that Creighton, Alira, and Oak tried to retrieve with Lily was a map to the sunken city of Soatha, where the Brine King rules under the ocean. Soagoth is another Asmiri god, the one that pirates and seafarers worldwide worshipped and feared. Soagoth was once a man. Sin tells us that he met Soagoth when he was a seafaring captain, the beloved leader of a prosperous and sprawling fisher tribe. Apparently, all of Soagoth's children were born monsters who were unfit to rule. Sin says this was a curse of legacy, and that a truly noble king would have surrendered his kingdom to cleaner blood. Soagoth, in desperation and vanity, continued to take wife after wife. It is said that he grew his shell to shield himself from the shame of his unworthy children. Lily says that in the city of Sawatha, before it sank to the bottom of the ocean, all the citizens were either eaten by the Brine King or picked to try to continue his family line. Near the beacon we find a letter from Benric. It details his wife being taken by the Brine King out to sea. This is also likely the fate of Nessa. We enter the Brine King's throne and find Nessa sitting upon a large, suspicious rock. She greets us, but this time her tone is not of fear, it's of smug contempt. Nessa and the Brine King have wanted us to arrive all this time, as a gift of either sacrifice or bride for Soagoth, depending on your chosen exile's agenda. The Brine King wants to take his practices from Sawatha and implement them on the surface, now that he is free from the slumber imposed by the king. Nessa is raised up, and we see that she is attached like an anglerfish's bauble to this giant crab, the Brine King. We must kill Soagoth and his army of crabs. Upon doing so, we get our first major god in the pantheon. Whalem Roth returns in his ship, shocked that we killed the deity that he and every pirate before him feared and sacrificed to. Whalem is so impressed, he offers to sail us to Act 7 to continue our quest to destroy the returned gods and bring down Kitana. Thank you so much for watching. It's your boy Noodle. If you like this video and this series, give me a thumbs up. Check out the videos below for more on this video. If you have any questions,
Oh, den hat die vor sich.
check out my stream, twitch.tv.
Weil muss ich mal reflex mal hinter ihn zu rollen.
Welcome back, Exile, to yet another video in Noodle's lore series. This video covers Act 7. Let's begin. As we saw while traveling through the forest in Act 6, the entrance to the previous forest encampment has been barricaded off. Whalem sails us from the Brine King's Reef to the new encampment of Act 7, the Bridge encampment. This is where Creighton used to be in Act 2. Sin tells us he can sense Malagaro's spirit nearby, like Chevron in Act 6. We'll need to capture Malagaro's spirit to eventually defeat Kitana. In the new encampment, we see Aramir, Helen, and Nina, but two of the previous people are missing. Silk and Bruce are no longer in the encampment. Silk seems to have wandered off of his own accord, but Bruce has been possessed by a revived god named Ralakesh. After we defeat the beast, a relic covered in Val inscriptions washed ashore in
Hallo,
the
was ist das?
encampment.
Aufhören.
Aramir was able to read them, and they spoke of the Val god Ralakesh. The Asmiri, as
Ich komme ja,
in
hör auf
Act
zu
2, are
jammern
an
hier.
ancient civilization going back to the time of the Val, but also before. The Asmiri had gods they worshipped, as well as recognizing the gods of other peoples. The chieftains of the Asmiri tribes were
Ist da
selected
sonst
by
nix?
trial,
Das kann
putting
ja nicht sein.
aspiring
Oh
leaders
Mann,
through a
naja, ja.
labyrinth filled with beasts and traps, and recognizing the victor as their leader. Fun fact, this Asmiri tradition is what inspired Izaro's labyrinth, which definitely requires its own video to cover. Around 900 BIC being before Imperialis Conceptus, a Val ambassador made contact with the Asmiri. For 500 years after this first contact, the Val and Asmiri intermingled. This is why there are Val ruins in this area, like what we explored at the end of Act 2. The Val helped the
Nein,
Asmiri
nur in
establish a written
13.
language and improve their agriculture, where prior to their contact, the Asmiri were purely oral tradition and somewhat primitive. However, the Val did not share one particular piece of their culture with the Asmiri,
Als ich noch
the
ein
Tears
Level.
of Magi.
Wir waren
which we
Level
know as
13 an
virtues.
Kotzen gegangen.
According to Trinian, Intellectus Prime, The Asmiri wrote that the vow had flesh adorned with glittering crystals. Because of their peaceful history together, the Asmiri welcomed in the survivors of the fall of the vow in 400 BIC. The fall of the vow occurred during the reign of Queen Atziri, who also requires her own video. The vow had been a large and powerful influence on Rayclast, with millions of citizens. Of these, only 3,126 vow survived to live with the Asmiri. One of the vow leaders and gods was named Ralakesh, Master of a Million Faces. Before 900 BIC and the peaceful contact between the two groups, Ralakesh and his vow followers had enslaved many Asmiri. Ralakesh was the leader of a vow city, but he desired to expand his power through rule and control of more people. Ralakesh desired to utilize the base animal instincts of men to rule them. Ralakesh has sought out Groost, the somewhat brutish leader of the Asmiri from the forest encampment, and is using Groost to begin his reign anew from the barricaded forest encampment. Ralakesh was able to transfer his spirit from the vow inscription to Groost. Now we must find and kill Groost to defeat Ralakesh. In Groost's absence, Helena has taken over as leader. Helena tells us that when Silk and Groost disappeared, she began investigating their disappearances. And during her investigation in the Fellshrine ruins, she learned of a map that Malagaro had created that could retain Malagaro's spirit. Apparently, this map was created before the Purity Rebellion, and when High Templar Vol learned of its existence, he attempted to destroy it. When he could not, he hid it deep within the Frisian Cathedral, which is now the Fellshrine ruins. When we leave the bridge encampment, we end up at the crossroads. We travel to the Fellshrine
Charlie,
to find
Befehle.
the map Malagaro forged. We find a secret staircase hidden within a sarcophagus in the crypt, which leads to a second level. In this level, we find Malagaro's map hidden away. In Act 2, we notice that the center of the Chamber of Sins has a reverie device, where we first learn about the existence of maps from the writings of Malagash. So we travel north, back to the Chamber of Sins, Malagaro's old laboratory, and find none other than Silk waiting for us by the map device. Silk has wandered by choice to the Chamber of Sins and tells
Also, wir können
us
jetzt mal
that he
gucken, was
has
es hier
a
gibt überhaupt.
daunting task before him, the last in his great journey. We
Es
must
gibt
kill the
gar
Black
nichts.
Death, one of Malagaro's
Ein
spiders from before the
Schatz
Cataclysm,
oder
like
so.
the Weaver
Ein
in
Sack.
Act 2. Silk wants the black venom only the Black Death can create, but seems oddly sympathetic to the Black Death, describing it as a beauteous eight-leg, twisted grotesque by the master of these loathsome halls, referring to Malagaro and the Chamber of Sins. To get to Black Death, we must use the reverie device to enter Malagaro's sanctum, the map we found. Malagaro's sanctum is our first encounter with a map. The reverie device opens up
Ich
6
hasse
portals for us to
Explore
enter
Wars.
this new vision of nightmare. Helena said this map allowed Malagaro to transfer his spirit to another form of existence, an existential safe house to which he could retreat should death ever attempt to take him.
Wer macht das da?
The map itself is
Kurtisane.
open and swamp-like, filled with spider creatures. In the corner of the map, we find a door to Malagaro's workshop, where we can presume Malagaro's spirit resides. Inside, Malagaro himself greets us. As we fight, he raises the Black Death spider that we seek, and Fidelitas, or Fidelitis, from Act 2.
Diese
Fun
Männerramparts.
fact, you can actually find and kill the Black Death in Act 2 in the Chamber of Sins on the first level. Upon defeating all 3 spirits,
Ja?
Malagaro's spirit is
Diese
captured. We
Männerramparts.
can take the Black Venom. In Act 2, we had to create the Black Elixir from the Baleful Gem and Venom from one of Malagaro's spiders, which we received from Malagaro's spike, dropped by the Weaver. Now we have Black Venom in its pure form. We return and give Silk this Black Venom. Silk tells us that his queen will reward us with honor and mercy when she rises up and claims what is hers. Silk wants to give this Black Venom to his queen as a wedding gift, and invites us to his wedding feast. Silk's sympathy towards the Black Death now makes more sense. Silk is not possessed by a god, but he has been influenced by one. Silk believes he will marry the spider goddess
Crush
Arakali,
Oh,
another Valgon, come back to life. For now, as a reward,
Ja,
Silk
rein,
gives us
aber.
a key to the dead, an underground path that will allow us to enter Bruce's barricade and defeat him.
Wir sind halt blau.
Now
Ich
go
weiß nicht,
into
ob
the
das
lower
hier so
level
gut
of the
sind.
Chamber of
Das
Secrets
Beschwörung.
and make our way underground towards Ralikesh and Bruce. We end up in the Ashen Field, which was previously the old field, but now is on fire. We can now enter the forest encampment. It has been revamped into a fortress, almost like an arena. In the middle stands a giant totem covered in faces. Ralikesh is known as the god of many faces, so we can presume this is some shrine or embodiment of Ralikesh. We are ambushed by many people, then some enraged beasts, and finally Bruce himself jumps down from the fortress wall as Lord of the Forest. Once we defeat him, Sin takes Ralakesh's essence, which destroys the faces on the totem. We can now use Ralakesh's power in our pantheon and travel on to the northern forest. There is clearly a lot of Val influence in these Asmiri lands, as the northern forest in Act 2 took us to the caverns where we explored underground Val ruins. Now we can explore east and find a different ancient Val city. Before we continue there is another minor god that has been awoken from the death of the beast, who is not a Val god. In the Dread Thicket has risen Gruthkul, Mother of Despair. Gruthkul is considered an other god, not given specific descent, although she is likely an Asmiri god. Her history is intertwined with that of Arakali. Gruthkul was the leader of a tribe near the mountains of the Asmiri range. Arakali was the leader of a Val city. When Arakali became a god, which will be discussed later in more detail, she was able to see visions of the future and past. In one of these visions, she saw the children of Gruthkul ruling over Arakali's people and land, their long white hair fluttering in the winds of Vinjani. Arakali took preemptive action and began killing Gruthkul's children one by one. Gruthkul, in response, led her people to attack Arakali with all their strength. They brought Arakali's empire to the brink of ruination. So in a desperate bid, Arakali pretended to be grievously injured and fled into a cavern. Gruthkul was tricked by this and followed. Inside the cavern, Arakali wrapped Gruthkul in silk. Did I mention Arakali is a giant spider? Yeah, she's a giant spider goddess. And buried Gruthkul with stones in the cavern. This cavern is where we find Gruthkul. While Arakali rebuilt her empire, Gruthkul began her own ascent to godliness, becoming the antlered creature driven by rage and grief that we find today. Gruthkul grew powerful, escaped from the cavern, and began destroying Arakali's empire once again. This time, in the face of famine, disease, and death, Arakali's people abandoned her, leaving her tied up in her own temple to face Gruthkul. After defeating Arakali, people began to worship Gruthkul, but underestimated how powerful and grief-stricken she had become in her new beastly form. Gruthkul killed everything in her path, unable to satiate her desire for revenge. Now we must put Gruthkul to rest. Once we defeat Gruthkul, Sin tells us something Gruthkul never knew. The children Gruthkul so grieves for had been plotting against Arakali, intending to take over her lands just as Arakali had seen in her visions, something Gruthkul herself would never have done. If Gruthkul's children had not threatened Arakali's empire, none of this tragedy would have occurred. Instead, both Gruthkul and Arakali met terrible ends, and now they both must meet another. In the Dread Thicket, besides Gruthkul's cavern, we find a bunch of fireflies. Nina has asked us to gather these and meet us in the Val City. Traveling across the winding causeway, we end up in this Val City, which we now know is where Arakali once reigned. Starting in the Dread Thicket and following the path here, we have found written shrines detailing the reign of Arakali, Spinner of Shadows. The city we find is giant and sprawling, a maze of ruins. In the center of the ruins, we find Yina standing by the Temple of Decay, the temple where Arakali's people tied her up in webs and left her to be killed by Gruthkul. The entrance to the temple is covered in a thick layer of spiderwebs. However, Yina's spirit has guidance. The fireflies we gathered are used to transform Yina into a flaming fox.
Wir haben den Checkpoint jetzt hier, da können wir rück zurückgehen. Kommen ja schnell wieder hierhin zurück.
I'm not sure if this makes
Das ist ja
him
doch
more
was
or
Cooles.
less
Ich glaube es
crazy,
nicht,
but it
aber wer
does
weiß.
give credit to the legitimacy of the spirit he listens to and follows. Fun fact, Nina tells us when we
Oh, come on.
Act 7 that her spirit knows sin, and that sin is much older than spirit. So likely spirit is something like the minor gods we have been murdering and turning into Pantheon pocket pals. So who is Arakali, the spider goddess? We've seen her battles with Breathful and how her reign ended, but Arakali has a very interesting history. Sin's introduction to Arakali is an interesting summation. Val legends say she crawled up from the blackest of pits during the creation of the world. No, her beginnings were far more mundane. A mortal harlot whose endless lust for loin and lecherous delight saw her transformed into the very image of her dark desires. Arakali did lead a Val city before her transformation into a god. She had an insatiable lust and was seen as a deity of love and fertility. The temple we are in, now named the Temple of Decay, was once erected to worship Arakali as the goddess of love. Her worshippers would bring her creatures, mostly venomous, and Arakali's favorite was the spider. This is likely where Silk has gotten the idea to give Arakali black venom as a present, as venom and spiders are her favorite. As Arakali ascended to a god,
Okay, das ist einfach nur Crap. Ich erinnere mich, hier gibt's überhaupt nichts Gutes.
you could switch between presenting as a human and a spider at will. You would often present
Lore.
as a human too, as
Prinzip,
air
ne?
barefoot
Hier ist immer gestartet.
lure mortals into the act of copulation.
Also auch alles.
She would then transform back into a spider,
Was hängt denn hier
drain
noch?
the victim of all fluids, and use their dehydrated corpse as temple
Oh,
decoration.
krieg ich da gerade hier einen Support drin? Das kann sein, dass dafür
But
gut ist.
Arakali was wise as well as sexy, and she was able to see visions of the past, present, and future to lead her empire and manipulate those around her. Her admirers expanded past just the Val city she commanded. There is even a Val queen named Tetzlapokal, who is known to be a devotee of Arakali, who ruled the Val city that surrounds the Temple of Decay after Arakali's demise. Before Sin had created the beast, he was invited to meet with Arakali on behalf of a small group of gods in alliance. Arakali's invitation was a trap, and Sin ended up in her love temple for apparently years. Sin was trapped as Arakali's slave up until the point that Arakali's own followers betrayed her in the face of Breathful's wrath. This paints quite a scene. Sin trapped in a sex dungeon with a sexy spider until the spider gets wrapped up in its own webs by its followers and stamped to death by a giant angry moose beast. It's a pretty wild ride, even for gods. Now, Arakali has risen and she is using her powers of lust and wisdom. We find a love letter, presumably written by Silk, to Arakali, that implies he's been hearing her voice in his head. It says he knows Arakali just wants a man to love her, to break the spell, and that Silk will do everything in his power to raise Arakali to rule Rayclass together. Clearly, Arakali's ability to manipulate and deceive is very strong. Silk waits for us in the heart of the
Gar nichts gibt's hier.
that we are not simply invited to the wedding feast for him and Arakali, but we are, in fact, the wedding feast. A massive spider rises from the depths of the chamber, and it must be Arakali. The fight begins with Silk watching on from his perch in the chamber. Halfway through the fight, Arakali climbs up to him, grabs him, and eats him before us. So much for needing a man to confront. After she dines on our chapless friend, we send her to her rightful end. Arakali falls before us, and we escape from the temple to the Sarn ramparts and Act 8. It's your boy Noodle. Thank you so much for watching. If you are enjoying this series, please consider subscribing, giving it a thumbs up. If you want to know more about the series, there is a playlist in the description. And if you'd like to support this project, think about joining my Patreon. You can vote on new videos, see pictures of my cat, get early access to these videos. And if you have any questions about the lore, feel free to drop in to my stream, twitch.tv/kittencatnoodle. And until next time, stay sane, Exile. Welcome back, Exile, to another video in Noodle's complete lore series. This video covers the legacy of the Val. Let's get started. In Path of Exile, we start the game in the year 1599 IC, which stands for Imperialis Conceptus, the founding of the Eternal Empire. There are many different civilizations currently in this world: the Oriath and the Templars, the Karui, the Marrakech, the Azmiri, and the Ezamites. There are also two civilizations that have been almost entirely wiped out by catastrophic events: the Eternals, who caused the cataclysm of 1336 IC that devastated Rayclass, and the Val, an ancient civilization that brought a similar devastation in 400 BIC. While remnants of the Val civilization remained, for the most part the Val were completely destroyed. But the influence of the Val, their thaumaturgy, their technology, and their beliefs is still prevalent. Their intermingling with the Azmiri in 900 BIC led to the first recordings of history, and their actions in 400 BIC that caused the fall of the Val inspired Malachi to take similar actions in his time, which caused the cataclysm that destroyed the Eternals. The Val's history spans way before the first official recordings of history in 900 BIC. There is a creation myth of the Val about a person or entity named Zibakwa. Zibakwa was born from the flesh of the gods, and from the carnage of Zibakwa we were born. One by one, the gods reclaimed their flesh, until all that remained was a droplet of pure light, the first Val. Perhaps the Val were the first people of Rayclast. They were certainly the first people to develop an advanced civilization with a focus on exploration, technology, and progress.
He's under there.
Before 900 BIC, Sin created the Beast, and before the Beast, there were
Mann, die
gods.
Kerl mag ich gar
The
nicht.
Beast was created to put all the gods to sleep, and its creation led to the formation of virtue gems and thaumaturgy. The Val were the first civilization to utilize these powerful gems. Even when the Val integrated with the Azmiri, they kept their use of these powerful gems to themselves. Trinian, a man tasked with studying and compiling the history of Rayclast, writes that our literature was conceived and born within the Azmiri's cultural marriage with the Val. Despite an exhaustive search, neither account nor passing reference can be found regarding gem usage amongst the early Azmiri. Though they described the Val as having flesh adorned with glittering crystals, our Azmirian ancestors were never privy to the gem's potentials or powers. The Val shared agriculture, technology, and language with the Azmiri, but did not share their most powerful and arguably most distinct accomplishment, the discovery and use of virtue gems, which they called Tears of Magie. There is evidence the Val civilization was not limited to the continent of Rayclast. Their accomplishments were studied in Oriath long after the fall, but they were actually present on Oriath before the fall. Templar Devaro, who lived just before we begin our journey, was asked to study Val artifacts brought to High Templar dominance. In his first journal, Devaro writes, "I have seen signs of blood and ancient sacrifice in the ghosting of our precious city." Could it be that these echoes point to the Val culture having extended all the way to the shores of Oriath? And in his second journal, he confirms, "My theory that the Val once dwelt in this land has proven fruitful. One of their ancient sites lies not far north from here. Through my thaumaturgy, I was granted special sight. I saw the ancient Val city that once stood in this place. All around me were signs of the legendary Queen Atziri ruling from afar. In addition, there are Val symbols used amongst the Templars as well. The symbols of the Val totems and Zeal's amplifier are the same as the Templar descry. While the Templar could have simply been inspired by the Val symbols, if the Val were on Oriath, they possibly interacted directly with the Templars. The Val inspired or directly influenced many of the civilizations in Path of Exile. But what made the Val the most influential civilization in history? Their most obvious contribution was their discovery and use of the Tears of Magie. These gems, in their pure form, appeared in the caverns underneath Mount Baruso, in tandem with the beast's creation and where Sin's beast resides. Aramir, an Oriathan scholar who fled Oriath and lives among some Azmiri on Rayclass, recounts that it is the Val who began the use of virtue gems, well before our imperial ancestors. A scholar who worked in the Sarn library, claims
Bah.
the Val were even more steeped in gem culture than our emperor, referring to Emperor Chittus Carandus and his gem lords. It's an obsession as old as civilization itself. The Val's Tears of Magi are the predecessors to the modern virtue gems our own Exile uses on our journey. The Val figured out how to use these gems to gain powers and fuel their civilization's advancement. By tapping into the gem's power, the Val were able to make huge advancements in their civilization, far beyond the capabilities of their contemporaries. And the way they fueled these gems was a form of magic called blood thaumaturgy. The Val are perhaps most notorious for this blood thaumaturgy, as it required sacrifices, sometimes on a massive scale. In Oriath, Aramir was tasked with studying Val artifacts by High Templar Dominus, much like Templar Devarro, who we touched on earlier. But Aramir found it rather baffling to think of the Val as a people who believed in science and progress, while they constructed elaborate sacrificial altars in the center of their cities. However, it was these
Das war ein Dokumentar.
sacrifices that allowed the Val to
Aber
make
ich glaube,
progress.
ein Slam, ey,
While
wie,
modern
oder?
thaumaturgy and virtue gems can be powered without sacrifices, the Val relied on blood thaumaturgy. They used sacrifice and murder to extract souls from victims, and these souls are what powered their Tears of Magi. Aramir's former colleague, Templar Devarro, would argue that blood thaumaturgy was more powerful than modern thaumaturgy, that the Templars had no idea as to the power they have ignored in the blood thaumaturgy they forbade. Devarro even dabbled in this blood thaumaturgy himself, recalling how he purchased 3 Karui slaves
Ich finde, das sollte auf dem richtigen Stockwerk sein, automatisch.
lads of 17. At the blood site in the ancient ruins, they pleaded with him. Something about the place, the corruption ingrained in the stonework, it spoke to them, and they knew. The powers demand blood, so I gave it to them. I opened the throats of those Karui lads and poured out their essence onto Adziri's altar. The artifacts that Devarro studied had their own form of blood thaumaturgy, giving Devarro visions and singing to him. He claims that the singing of the relics, to me, no longer pains my ears. In fact, I hear music,
Muss auch da ein Checkpoint
songs
sein.
revealing great truths to me. While Devarro felt these relics and visions gave him great insight, they also drove him to madness, and Devarro died after killing 2 children he'd abducted and himself in an attempt to join Adziri as a family in the afterlife. Even before the Tears of Magi, the Val were curious about the power of sacrifice. The Val gods Ralakesh and Arakali dabbled in sacrifices. Arakali lured her victims to her temple by presenting as a lust-filled woman and then turning into a spider to drain her victims' life force. She used these victims to create medicines for her people. Healer of hearts,
Ja, das ist nicht so
Arakali,
gut.
with
Ich meine, er
the
hat eine
juices
so
of
quasi so
lust and the venom of the spider,
Brutus-Fähigkeit
she
zum
brought back
Ranziehen
many
anscheinend.
from the brink of death. When Arakali died, her people began dying as well. Our queen's medicines had once sustained us. Now famine and plague ravaged what little remained of our land. The god Ralakesh enslaved and killed local Azmiri and his own people to study the best way to control people and extract obedience. This history formed their society around slavery and sacrifice. The flavor text of the String of Servitude reads, "For the Val, the relationship between slave and master was as intimate and volatile as that of lovers." Sacrifice as a means to progress was so integral, many were willing to give their lives for the advancement of the Val. However, the sacrifices were not always clean and simple. In fact, many thaumaturgical advancements came from exploring suffering and torturing sacrifices. So great was the thaumaturgy of the blood priest's mark that sacrifices soon welcomed their death, is the flavor text of the Mark of Submission.
Ja, das ist geil.
The Val god Yugal and the infamous Zerfi studied how terror and torture could be utilized. Blood thaumaturgy and sacrifices were not always neat and consensual. Sacrifices were mostly performed to power and create thaumaturgy, but were also used to gain knowledge about the human condition and advance their technology. According to the flavor text of the Sacrificial Harvest Jewel, the Val used human sacrifice to power their empire. They, too, eventually sought means to make their machines run more efficiently. The Val gods Yugal and Ralakesh sacrificed to study human nature. Yugal focused on the power of terror, and Ralakesh wanted to tap into the human instincts that swayed people to obey his rule. Yugal said of his studies, "Civilization is a costume worn to conceal our truest natures. Oh, that we could become terrified children once again, that we could understand in an instant that everything is hopeless, everything is death. There is no next step, no reprieve. Life is terror, and terror is life." The Val found knowledge through these dark acts. The Val's elaborate and lasting architecture is also a testament to their desire for progress and longevity. The ruins we explore in Act 2 and 8 are huge and intricate.
Da oben.
Another
Ja,
stunning Val
das
relic is the
Sackgasse 3.
Temple of Atsuatl, built as a hub of technological innovation. The lore compilation document I reference often says that Val ruins are populated in part by creatures referred to as constructs, said by Alva Valet to have been created by combining metal and insects. It continues, the Val conducted research into such areas as explosives, electric lifebloods, bioengineering, and weather manipulation, and they studied other realms, including breaches and maps. Alva, a master NPC with Val ancestry, is fascinated with Val artifacts, and particularly the Temple of Atsuatl. Using her own blood, she's able to perform a ritual of blood thaumaturgy to travel back to the Temple of Atsuatl during its construction. Alva tells us that the lost Temple of Atsuatl is said to be the most famed in all Val history and myth. Best I can tell, the temple began its construction in the final years of the Val Empire. Some say it was a place of darkness, home to the most vile of sacrifices, but there are others who claim the temple to be the birthplace of technology. Even our own is said to pale in comparison to what was being forged within those walls. We can travel back in time with Alva to influence the final construction of the Temple of Atsuatl, which can include rooms studying breaches, empowering the Omnitect, the mechanical boss of the temple, altering gems, generating tempests, and studying corruption itself. Besides the temple's Omnitect, one notable Val technological creation we encounter is the Val Oversoul in Act 2. This large creature-like machine is released when we break an ancient seal while traveling through the Val ruins. The Val Oversoul continued to exist and operate past the fall of the Val in 400 BIC, and actually terrorized the Eternals in the infancy of the Empire, founded by Asmiri Targus Baruso. Trinian wrote,
Das ist vielleicht erst
5
ein
years
Level.
after Baruso's death, Emperor
Ich hab ja ein
Caspero
13. Skill
was
hier
dead.
mal.
Caspero was
Zwischen.
dismembered by something referred to simply as
Okay,
a
so.
dark being. As we know, this dark being was the Val Oversoul. After we break the ancient seal, the area around the Val
Okay.
ruins, stretching all the way to the forest encampment, is covered in a dark haze. The Val Oversoul's
ach
presence
nö,
in
es gibt ihm was
35
nicht, ey.
IC caused this same darkness. Though it seems fanciful
das
to
scheiß
contemplate
Spiel,
a
ey.
portion of our empire cast in
Oh,
perpetual
Mann.
night, Asmirian writers of the time are unified in their depiction. It was General Alano Frisha who avenged the Emperor's death and who triumphed in driving away the pervasive darkness. Alano himself wrote that our legions drove the dark being deep into the recesses of its lair and sealed it away for eternity. So the Val successfully created a sentient machine that was not only powerful, but could control the weather in an area. The Val used sacrifice to combine lives and souls with their gems and technology. While the methods are brutal, the results are inarguable. Their thaumaturgy, technological accomplishments, and the fantastic architectural sites are what made the Val so fascinating to many civilizations after their fall. Perhaps the most well-known site of the Val is Azala Val, which is where Kinatsiri reigned. Kinatsiri was the last ruler of the Val, and it was her thaumaturgist, Doriani, working to grant Kinatsiri eternal beauty and literal immortality, who caused the fall of the Val in 400 BIC. Azala Val is where Sarn, the capital city of the Eternal Empire, was built. 400 years after the fall, Tarkus Baruso descended from the mountains and led his 80,000 tribesmen and women through the Doomlands of Azala Val. There he planted his banner on Atziri's grave, and with these words, founded our great and eternal empire.
Ja, für mich
Caruso
Feuerresistenz, ne?
condemned the Val in their use of thaumaturgy, but choosing Atziri's grave in Azala Val as the capital of his new empire is, in its own way, reverence for the legacy of the Val. You can't discuss the accomplishments of the Val civilization without discussing their fall.
Willst du echt schließen?
As mentioned previously, and will be discussed in further detail later, Queen Atziri was obsessed with retaining her youth and achieving immortality like the gods before the beast. Her thaumaturgist, Doriani, was absolutely prolific in his contributions to blood thaumaturgy, and his inspiration was direct communication with the beast itself. Malachi, the thaumaturgist responsible for the modern cataclysm of 1336 IC, also had communion with the beast. Perhaps the beast desired these apocalyptic occurrences and influenced these thaumaturgists, knowing their desire for power and progress would lead them to causing these catastrophes. Certainly, neither the fall nor the cataclysm would have happened without power-hungry thaumaturgists seeking to reach the source of all
Unethisch.
the beast. The fall of the Val was caused by Doriani entering the beast in a ritual referred to as Doriani's Cradle. Doriani created an entrance into the beast that we reopen in Act 9, and took virtue gems into the beast for this ritual. Physical interaction with the beast was also what caused Malachi's cataclysm. Even though Doriani's thaumaturgy and decision to perform this ritual was influenced by the beast, and the beast is the source of all thaumaturgy, this ritual and interaction caused the fall. Doriani's ritual killed millions of Val, leaving only a few thousand survivors. Trinian wrote about the fall of the Val, thousands of years in the making, gone in a blink of Solaris's burning eyes. The Asmiri tell of the Valish immigration. Small bands of tattered, shambling survivors, bereft of families, their wealth, and in many cases their sanity. They were welcomed and cared for, but none could give the Asmiri the one thing they sought in
Nee.
return. None could tell them how the Val realm came to such a sudden and catastrophic end. 3,126 survivors, with civilization counting in its millions.
Insane.
It could be that the survivors were not aware of Doriani's
haben wir
actions, but considering they lived alongside the Asmiri for 500 years without sharing their interest in use in virtue
69,2.
gems and thaumaturgy,
85.
they could still have been protecting these secrets even in
Ich bin
the
Deadpool
aftermath.
quasi.
In the distant repository memory seen in Synthesis League, we hear Aramir reflecting on his own studies of the Val. He says, I used to pride myself in taking care of these tomes, but the ancient treatises concerning the Val should be burned. He's making me research for him, and the things I'm reading concern all mankind. I would think my fears of the end of the world ridiculous.
Warum
except
ist man nicht
it's happened
automatisch
before.
da, wo man hin
A brief
muss?
summary of the Val timeline is as follows. The first Val was Zibaqua,
Hier
who
war schon.
formed from the
Also,
flesh
der
of
andere.
gods. Sometime between then and the creation of the beast, there were the gods, who may have all lived
Voll
at the same
lästig, das
time due
ganze
to their
System
long
hier.
lifespan, Yugal, Arakali, and Ralakesh. After the creation of the beast, and after the peaceful Asmiri contact in 900 BIC, there was Zerfi. Zerfi lived before Queen Atziri, who lived alongside Kishara, Doriani, and started the Temple of Atzawaddle, and caused the fall of the Val in 400 BIC. The Val Oversoul reappeared around 35 IC.
Destruction!
Isius Perandus recorded his series on the history of Rayclass around 1330 IC. Then, just before current times, Aramir and Templar Devaro studied Val artifacts for High Templar dominance. And in the current year, 1599 IC, we work with Alva, who has Val ancestry and blood. We've already touched on the Val gods before the beast, so we'll look more at the Val who lived before the fall. One of the most famous Val who lived after the creation of the beast was Zerfi. Zerfi was a Valish noble who lived for 168 years, and his longevity was a huge inspiration to Queen Atziri. Zerfi's long life was not typical of Val or any person of this time. Zerfi had actually discovered a blood thaumaturgy that allowed him to live this long, but his actions were not condoned by the Val rulers. He was considered the Val's most infamous serial killer. Over a period of 128 years, Zerfi abducted, tortured, and murdered 13 victims, all in their 20th year of life. All of noble descent, all gemlings. Perhaps it was Zerfi's choice of nobles and gemlings rather than slaves or willing victims that changed his status from thaumaturgist to serial killer. His pursuits were also wholly selfish, as he did not desire to share the knowledge gained from his murders with others. His sacrifices were only meant to elongate his own life. Compared to the mass sacrifices condoned by the vow, 13 victims is almost nothing. But it was not the amount of people
Yes,
Zerfi killed,
more.
it was the
Don't
quality
stop.
of his heinous
The
acts that
beast
set them
hungers.
apart.
Horrific.
Zerfi inflicted
They're
insane
insane.
torture on his victims, mutilating them while they were alive. Some sources claim that the techniques of torture were so refined that he was able to inflict the most intense and lasting pain the human body is capable of sustaining. Zerfi's choice of victims, 20-year-old gemling nobles, was very intentional. When Zerfi was found dead next to his final victim, his body
Anything
was
take
not
your
that
fancy?
of a 160-year-old man, but of a 20-year-old. Zerfi's blood thaumaturgy allowed him to become physically like his victims while still retaining his own appearance and mind. What's interesting is that Zerfi was found dead next to his final victim, and while the victim was dead, he was unmolested and unmutilated. Zerfi's cause of death is unknown. Zerfi's previous victims did not die until they were tortured to the absolute maximum. So what caused Zerfi to die? What caused his final victim to die if he was not tortured at all? How long
No,
could Zerfi
man.
have lived if this strange reaction hadn't happened? Since Zerfi did not record the methods or results of his sacrifices, his dark art will remain a mystery. On a lighter note, a contemporary of Adsiri was the great explorer named Kishara. In Act 8, Whalem wants us to recover her star, a compass that assisted Kishara in her travels. Whalem describes Kishara as a tough-as-nails Val lassie, said to have explored every coast, cove, and bay of this blasted continent with the help of her star, said to be fair humming with thaumaturgy, able to guide its mistress wherever she be fixing to journey. So, Kishara's star was a thaumaturgical invention. Whether Kishara created the star herself or had it created isn't mentioned. We also cannot say that the star was not created with blood thaumaturgy or sacrifice. But Kishara's intentions were clearly more benevolent than other famous Val we've seen. She wanted to explore the world and document her findings about other locations and peoples. Somehow, Kishara got on the bad side of Queen Adsiri. Whalem muses that Adsiri weren't the most understanding of lasses, implying Adsiri was hostile towards other women and perhaps jealous of Kishara's accomplishments. He adds Kishara may have upset Adsiri with some spiky facts about the outside world, so it could have been the information Kishara had documented that upset Adsiri rather than Kishara herself. Either way, Adsiri took her ship and made sacrifices of her crew, forced the poor girl into hiding. But before she left, Kishara hid the star somewhere near the causeway. Kishara was able to escape Adsiri's wrath. Whalem wants us to retrieve Kishara's star so that he and his granddaughter Lily can explore the world together with the help of this thaumaturgical compass, which is actually very
Ja, die sind so Low-Level,
Now
lohnt
we
gar
must
nicht da
talk
drauf
about
zu
the Val's
grafen,
most
denke ich mal.
recognizable and notorious ruler, Queen Adsiri. Inspired by Zerfi, Adsiri wanted to obtain immortality. She had her thaumaturgist, Doriani, pursue this dream. While Doriani's actions were the ultimate cause of the fall of the Val, it was all supported by Queen Adsiri. Whether his decision to create Doriani's cradle, the act that caused the fall, was part of this particular pursuit is unclear. But under Adsiri's rule and Doriani's thaumaturgy, the Val civilization hit its peak. The flavor text of Doriani's fist reads, Doriani's ingenuity raised the Val Empire to unprecedented heights. His curiosity reduced it to ruins and
cool.
bones. Adsiri may not have directed all of Doriani's actions and creations, but she was certainly the benefactor that allowed him to enact his thaumaturgy. and Doriani's thaumaturgy required a great amount of sacrifice and blood.
Ja.
Sin claims that, in neglecting to provide the beast with ambitions, I made it vulnerable to the ambitions of others, implying Doriani's acts were all his own design. But Doriani claimed, in my dreams, a voice spoke to me. It said, "My reach knows no bounds. All that is pure is destined to rot. All that lives is destined to serve." This may be Doriani's beliefs translating the beast's voice into his own desires,
It's too
but
bad.
Doriani felt that the beast wanted him
Weiß ja,
to
ein bisschen mehr
perform these
Armor.
sacrifices. Adziri even took direct part in sacrifices. The river crossing memory in Synthesis is from the perspective of a Val person who says, "We pack our camp just before
Vielleicht
sunrise and
ziemlich
journey
geil
towards the
auf
capital
Resistenzen,
as
aber
all
nichts
Val.
was
We
ähnliches.
hear the crowd before we see them. Word of our victory
Wir
spread
haben
quickly,
kaum,
and
nicht
even
mal
the queen
Cold
has come to meet
Resistance.
us.
Was macht denn
My
der?
family
Ich geh
has
einfach mal
come to
gucken, wenn
watch
es
the
nicht
ceremony.
klappt, kann ich immer
As I lay on the stone altar,
rausgehen
I hear them
einmal und
chanting my name.
gucken, ob ich
It's
was
the
ändern kann.
last thing I hear before the queen's dagger is plunged into my chest. While Adziri did not create the Val culture of ritual sacrifice, she and Doriani embraced it. When returning pages to Siosa about the Val, written by his colleague Isius Perandus, one page reads, "She drenches her altar with the blood of those deranged enough to question her vision." And Trinian wrote that Queen Adziri was prepared to slaughter her own people in the desperate pursuit of perpetual youth and beauty. Adziri took advantage of the Val's willingness to sacrifice in the name
Nice.
of progress to use them for her own selfish pursuit. Her vanity was clear in the way she held court.
Oh shit, der
It has been written
Hauptfigur.
of Queen Adziri that her throne room was lined with mirrors and that she held court naked, demanding the same of those wishing her audience. The theory was that a naked man had nothing to hide, but one might venture that Adziri utilized her striking physical presence to influence courtly engagements in her favor. Adziri recognized and lavished in the power of her physical beauty. The fear of losing this beauty and this power drove her to allow increasingly debaucherous studies of blood domination. But Adziri may not have been entirely self-absorbed as a ruler. The Temple of Atzilath was the center of many technological advancements by the Val and was created during Queen Adziri's rule. Some speak of Adziri as a visionary, the woman who would lead the Val into a brighter future. Others are less kind, suggesting that Adziri's love for herself overshadowed any love for her people. It's clear Adziri's pursuit of eternal beauty and life was selfish, but Adziri also promoted Val progress and success. However, Adziri's desire for immortality and
Ich hasse es,
pursuit
wenn die
of
einfach wieder
results
volles Leben kriegen.
led to her increased bloodlust. The Val sentencing duel reads, "In their final days, every
Oh,
crime
nein.
was punishable by death. Adziri's empire ran on blood, but the blood was running dry."
Ah,
Has
ja,
always relied on
genau.
sacrifice as a means to an end for research, technology, and thaumaturgy. But Adziri's desperation was the primary catalyst for the overreach and consequent fall of the Val. Unable to achieve Xerxes' supposed immortality, she allowed Doriani to act however he desired, with the hope that he could find the secret to eternal life. Instead, the Val found death and destruction on an unimaginable scale. Thanks so much for watching. It's your boy Noodle. If you like these videos, please subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, check out the full playlist in the description. Thanks as always to all my patrons who keep this project going. There may be
Oh
some
nein.
delay in upcoming videos as I'll be traveling, but until the next one,
Oh.
Exile.
Desolation. I will take out your
Hello again, Exile, and welcome to another
So
video
war doch ein bisschen laut,
in
oder?
the series.
Aber ich nehme mit dem Eis durch. Oh! Ich bin schon gedodged, das zählt nicht.
After slaying our colleague and escaping the Temple of Decay, we find ourselves on the outside of Sarn's ramparts. We travel along the fortified wall until we find some stairs leading up to the top of the rampart. From here we can enter the Sarn encampment. The encampment seems to be festering. The water is green and a nasty haze covers the place. Rigor has left mysteriously,
Oh, dann machen wir den Scheiß
telling
da.
Aramoa he wants to find a cure for his mutilated body and mind,
Einfach im
telling
Kreis
Clarissa he wants
laufen.
to find himself. Argan suspects he has gone back to Ezra. Clarissa,
Jetzt
Maramoa,
muss die
and
Phase in
Harker
seinem
Clarissa
Stehen
has
bleiben.
raised Tolman from the dead and
Mit
chained
gemischte
him up
Deal.
by her
Oh,
side.
ja, okay.
Maramoa tells us that the
Schlechtes
gods
Games,
have
ja.
risen in Sarn as well. Two sisters, Solaris and Lunaris, who have dedicated temples in Sarn, are waging war on each other and endangering Sarn. Argan tells us that a hag has appeared in the sewers, and he strongly suspects it's Doedre Darktongue. Sin also senses and smells her presence. So we head
Wie hat
to
mich das
the
eigentlich...
sewers to
Oh.
find her.
Nein! What the fuck? Was ein
We had not
Bullshit,
previously
ey.
encountered Doedre before
Leck
we
mich doch
meet
mal.
her
Okay, wir
at
gehen
Ford,
Eisdings
guarding
holen.
Malachi's organs. We know
Das war
Doedre was a student of
Bullshit.
Malagaro
Sorry fürs
before she
Rumschreien.
got her nickname Darktongue,
bin
and
einfach-
Malagaro himself
Keine Ahnung,
cut
das
out
ist
her
einfach dumm
tongue.
von mir immer.
Doedre
ich
seems
hab gar
the
keine
most brutal and
Eisdinger,
visceral of
oder?
Malachi's three students.
Damn.
Doedre's method of thaumaturgy
Oh, ich kann
was
vielleicht
to
welche
take things
kaufen.
apart,
Doch, hier
to
ist Cold
understand
Resistance.
from dissection and destruction, rather than creating something new. Fun fact, there is reason to believe that Doedre's work was primarily creating virtue gems with curses, as implied by her own skills and items dedicated to Doedre. Doedre's manifesto gives some insight into why Doedre's spirit returns to the sewer of Sarn.
Ja, es sollte mich insane stark machen gegen die gleich. Zack.
Mysteries in muscle. Plunder
Zack.
the intestinal fortress. Reach deep into bowels of power. The esoterica of kings lies not in the mind, but in the beating walls of bloodied heart. Other than her interest in people's insides, it is not clear why Doedre appears in the sewers, unlike Chevron and Malagaro, who have clear ties between their life and their location of reincarnation. As we travel deeper in these sewers, we find Doedre's cesspool, which sounds just lovely. Inside, we
Das ist so
battle
unfair.
Doedre.
Holy shit,
Doedre
ey.
seems to be a shapeshifter. She looks much different than her form in the belly of the beast, where she was a bloated, floating, wrinkly toad witch.
Ah,
Now she's thin, flabby, to
Leicht
the point of being
übertrieben, Junge.
grotesque and much more agile. When we successfully slay her, Sin comes to collect her soul. We now have the three spirits we need to revive the beast. The sewers sprawl all over the city, and from here we can go either towards the Solaris Temple to the east, or the Lunaris Temple to the west. We'll head out to the east towards the key and Clarissa's romantic quest. Clarissa has plans to revive Tolman
Ich hasse es,
from
wenn die am
his
Rand
zombie
stehen.
status to normal resurrected human.
Einfach
using an
lame.
ancient
Hör
artifact
lame.
from
Hör
the
weg.
time of
Hör
the
weg.
first Emperor
I don't
Verussa,
like this.
called the Ankh of
Er hat sich in
Eternity.
Wolf verwandelt. Das war
Clarissa
nur...
believes that somewhere in the key, the Ankh has been hidden, and she has set up her own resurrection
Ich bin
site
auch
for Tolman once we
gedolcht.
found it. The Ankh of Eternity is indeed hidden in there. The Ankh is a thaumaturgical artifact supposed to revive the dead. Emperor Tarkus Barusso's wife, Kiara, died giving birth to their son. In Barusso's grief, he used the Ankh on her. By all accounts, Kiara was brought back from the dead with the Ankh. Even though Barusso has locked all the artifacts of Val thaumaturgy in the depths of Mount Barusso, he turned to
Bullshit!
this thaumaturgical artifact to resurrect his wife. Clarissa believes that with the Ankh and the correct Asmirian ritual, she can revive Tolman. When we bring Clarissa the Ankh, she begins the ritual. Shockingly, Tolman does not resurrect cured and happy. He is aggravated and monstrous, and we slay him before Clarissa's eyes. Sorry, Clarissa. Clarissa laments that Barusso must have hidden the Ankh not as a valuable item too powerful for others to use, but because of its horrible effects. Hopefully, Clarissa will leave Tolman's body alone this
Oh,
time.
gesprochen.
To get to the Solaris Temple from the key, we must travel through the Grain Gate. The Grain Gate was a landmark of the Purity Rebellion. Emperor Chittis had been hoarding food for his genuine legionnaires and elite loyalists. Victorio, the people's poet who helped High Templar Vol create unrest among the citizens of
Oh, das ist
Sarn
ein Bruder.
and utilize the
Halsschaden.
sewers as a hiding place,
Schaden
knew
ist so
Chittis
lächerlich.
was storing food in the Grain Gate. To draw attention away from where Vol would engage
Scheiß mal,
Sarn,
Tod muss ich auch das
Victorio
Charme-Dings kriegen.
told the starving people
Das wäre nur
of Sarn
fair,
about
finde ich.
food in the Grain Gate would inspire riots and draw guards away from the attack. The Grain Gate is near the slums and
Oh,
marketplace that we
mir fehlt
explored
jetzt zu
in
essen.
Act 3.
Aber ein bisschen habe ich nicht aufgepasst. Hätte ich dodgen können, glaube ich. Aber manchmal, wenn es so genau in der Mitte ist, dann bringt das alles nichts. Oh!
Emperor Chittis's heart gem. Emperor Chittis Ferrandis had a virtue gem implanted above his heart to give him thaumaturgical powers, but also to link him to all of his gemlings and have influence over them. That is why when Mayor Ondar stabbed Emperor Chittis, many of the gemlings died, and were subsequently risen as the Undying by the Cataclysm not much later. Malachi was always a step ahead of both Emperor Chittis and Vol, and has managed to keep his favorite gemlings, led by Captain Alsaris, safe from both the Purity Rebellion and the Cataclysm. That is, until we come along and slay them almost 300 years later. We leave the Grain Gate and cross the Imperial Fields outside the city limits until we find an entrance to the Solaris Temple. In the second level of the Solaris Temple, where Diala once waited for us, we instead find a portal. Inside is a large sun and Dawn, harbinger of Solaris. Dawn is an exile who is
umgefallen.
to
Was?
Solaris. He's guarding the Sun Orb, one of 2 ancient orbs we need to gather. We defeat Dawn, take the Sun Orb, and exit the Solaris.
Wow, das ist zu lame. Oh.
Solaris Concourse, referred to as the Battlefront in Act 3. In Act 3, the Ebony Legion had
Der Zug hat nicht gezählt, das war ein Bug. Das war eigentlich unmöglich, damit konnte er mich gar nicht killen. Eigentlich sollen die gar nicht so nah aneinander spawnen, damit sowas nicht passieren kann.
To the Lunaris Concourse, to protect Piety, who was primarily operating out of the Lunaris Temple. This is called the Harbor Bridge, and we are now able to cross it to get between the 2 temples. In the middle of the bridge is the Sky Shrine, but for now we will go past it to the Lunaris Concourse. In the Lunaris Temple, where we once fought Piety, is a moon and Dusk, harbinger of Lunaris, another exile gone sycophant. We defeat Dusk and take the Moon Orb. Before we battle Solaris and Lunaris, we go out to the Lunaris Concourse, which connects to the bathhouse. If we had gone west in the sewers, we would end up in the Grand Promenade. We did not explore the side of Sarn in Act 3. The promenade was, quote, a favored walk of noble lords. And in fact, we find it haunted by one notable lord now. Mayor Ondar, the man who betrayed and stabbed Emperor Chittis for the Purity Rebellion, is an apparition wandering here, notably with a dagger or short sword in hand. The bathhouse was where many notable elite of Sarn would go for more sinful pleasantries than walking. Hargan has told us that inside the bathhouse is a valuable heirloom he would like us to steal for him, called the Wings of Vastiri. The Wings of Vastiri is an ancient item made of gold, the highest symbol of office for the Mariketh, held by the Sekima of Sekimas. Hargan has a thing for collecting historical artifacts, it seems. The last time these Wings of Vastiri were in the hands of the Mariketh was during Sekima Asenath's reign, the Sekima before Deshret. The Eternal Empire was driving the Mariketh out of their lands in the Vastiri Plains, and this effort was headed by Hector Titusius, the one who Deshret turned into a Roa saddle. General Hector Titusius, as we discussed in Act 4, was a fervent lover of thaumaturgy, having every joint in his body replaced by virtue gems. He was powerful and brutal. Sekima Asenath, wearing the Wings of Vastiri, united all the Akaras, or tribes, of the Mariketh to fight together against Titusius. Unfortunately, Sekima Asenath was slain by Titusius, and the Mariketh were driven back out to the Vastiri plain. Titusius kept the Wings of Vastiri as a prize.
Da bin ich auch beim ersten Mal aufgestorben.
To the bathhouse, which is now his tomb.
Ja.
General Hector Titusius has risen and now stands beside the
Geht eigentlich noch irgendwas?
With all his armor, it's hard to tell if the undead Titusius has any skin. However, the amount of blood effects during this battle make me hope Deshret left no skin after making a saddle out of his hide. After we kill Titusius, we can open his tomb to find the Wings of Vastiri and return them to Hargan. Why we don't return these prized wings to the Mariketh up in Highgate is a question of our morality we'll just all have to sit with. There is one minor god in Act 8, and he lives in the High Gardens that connect to the bathhouse, not to be confused with the Imperial Gardens of Act 3 around the Scepter of God.
Holy shit.
At the end of the High Gardens
das
resides Ugel,
Maximum?
reflection of terror. Ugel is another Val god like Ralakesh and Arakali of Act 7. Ugel was a scholar who became obsessed with what he believed was the most powerful and universal experience, terror. Ugel would kidnap children and terrorize them, using a device of his own creation called an Eldritch Mirror, to amplify and extend that experience of terror for his studies. Ugel wrote that, in nature, there are many feelings exclusive only to man, but terror is not one. Terror flourishes in our world, transcending all things. It is the bedrock on which our great cosmos is
Haben wir
born.
niemanden Sachen
Ugel
verkauft? Außer
discovered
Magier,
something in his
Trash.
studies horrific or powerful enough for Ugel to bend
What
Val
the
leadership to his whim
fuck?
and
Ey,
have
das ist
some Val
Diskriminierung.
worship him. And so, Ugel became a god.
Verkaufst du jetzt
Ugel
was?
resides in a section
Ja.
called the Pools of Terror,
Oh
which is an apt
nee,
parallel to his
ey,
mirrors of terror.
unfair.
Ugel appears in the form of a fetid mob, a truly terrifying creature with a mouth down its entire body and 2 arms and 2 legs bent backwards, misshapen and springy. We can kill Ugel for another minor pantheon power. We return to the center of the harbor bridge, to the sky shrine with our sun and moon orbs. These orbs are ancient, said to exist before the Asmirian tribes were founded. According to Hargan, the sun's orb said to contain all that has been, while the moon orb holds all that will be. On the floor of the sky shrine is a large mural with half the moon and half the sun. Above it looms a large statue of 2 sisters battling ferociously. At the base of this shrine we can place the sun and moon orbs. Solaris and Lunaris are Asmiri gods, and the oldest gods besides sin and innocence that we have encountered so far. There is an Asmirian creation myth that Solaris and Lunaris were able to control the sun and moon respectively. Solaris was thought to guide the sun across the sky with threads of shimmering gold, whilst Lunaris sought the wax and wane of moon with a sickle of purest silver. They were twin sisters who ruled together over the ancient Asmiri for a time. The exact timeline of the following events is unclear, but during Solaris and Lunaris' rule, a trickster named Tangmazu was able to turn the sisters against each other, leading the sisters to wage war on each other for the rest of time. Someone wearing a gray mask, presumably Tangmazu, masquerading as Lunaris or a Lunaris devotee, captured Solaris and imprisoned her. Her flames were quenched, her life laid bare. While Solaris was captured, Lunaris ruled on, alone. After many days, a devotee of Solaris named Kulrik found Solaris deep beneath the earth and freed her. Solaris came back to Earth and captured Lunaris in flaming nets, vowing to repay her kin in kind, blinding Lunaris with a sharpened blade, chaining her up and locking her in a cage. Solaris then slaughtered all of Lunaris' devotees, then turned on Lunaris and demanded she tell the truth about Solaris' initial capturing, torturing her as she drew her confessions, but Lunaris spoke not a word to her sister Insane. Lunaris was rescued by her last devotee, Kulina, who hid Lunaris away so she could heal. Lunaris was not aware of what had happened to Solaris and thought Solaris had simply gone mad, but was urged by Kulina to wage war in turn against Solaris. Since then, Solaris and Lunaris have been at war, separate entities forever in battle. However, in Act 3, Grigor does tell us that the Eternals revered Sun and Moon as the 2 eyes of their god, the right eye judging Solaris, the left eye merciful Lunaris. So even in their war, they are often worshipped together. It's hard to pinpoint why Solaris would believe that Lunaris was behind her initial capture, or capable of doing that. We know it was Tangmazu who captured Solaris, but his motivations are also unclear. It is probable that the Grey Mask was associated with Lunaris in some way, but previous to this incident, the 2 had ruled together and were seemingly very close. There is a 3-part story told by the captured souls to upgrade Soul of Lunaris in our pantheon that I'm unsure is related but may play some part. In this story, Lunaris has a sickly child, who she drowns in the ocean as a mercy.
What the fuck?
As the boy couldn't be
What the
happy,
fuck?
so he was silent, clean, and still in Lunaris' mind. The Asmiri tribe that Solaris and Lunaris ruled together put Lunaris on trial for this murder, but her fiery sister fought in vain to defend her. This means this incident must have happened before the capture of Solaris, as Solaris still loved her sister enough to defend her before their people. However, the story implies Lunaris does go a bit mad from this incident. I'll quote the entire third section. But Lunaris refused to admit any wrongdoing. She'd saved her child, had she not? He was safe now, buried beneath the dirt. Conviction gnarled around her fragile mind, and in her pride, she rose to seek a deathless throne. The term deathless throne is a phrase referring to immortality, but it's an interesting choice in the context of Lunaris and Solaris continuing to rule after Lunaris had killed her own son. Perhaps murdering her own child and seeing nothing wrong with it put a seed of doubt into Solaris' mind, so that it seemed possible Lunaris could betray Solaris. Clearly, Tangmazu's gray mask was used to implicate Lunaris, or at least her devotees. But for Solaris to believe it was possible, there had to be some seed of doubt. Tangmazu was able to succeed in turning the sisters against each other. When we placed the sun and moon orbs at the base of the statue depicting Lunaris and Solaris fighting, they burst to life. For a moment, the two battle each other, still compelled by their eternal war. Then they take turns battling us, and we defeat them both, ending their eternal struggle. We now have Solaris and Lunaris as major gods in our pantheon. On defeating the sisters, we can travel out to the aqueduct leading to Highgate, which is now flowing with blood. Thank you for watching. It's your boy Noodle. If you're enjoying this series, consider liking this video and subscribing. Check out the rest of the series in the playlist below. I'm taking a quick hiatus from Twitch, but thank you to all my patrons supporting this video series, and feel free to leave any questions in the comments below. And until next time, stay sane, Exile. I see you, little mouse. Welcome back to another video in Noodle's complete Path of Exile lore series. This video is part 1 of the Xana, Shaper, and Elder story. Let's begin.
Achso, ich habe es jetzt hier im
Once we
Inventar,
complete the 10
oder?
story acts of Path of Exile, we meet a new NPC in the epilogue of the restored Oriath Square. Her name is Xana, and she has just returned from Rayclast because we have defeated Kitava. Impressed, she asks us to join her in a new side area from the square called the Templar Laboratory. Xana tells us her father, who has been missing for 20 years, was working on something in this laboratory when he disappeared. She's been putting together the story of his disappearance, what he was working on, and what happened.
True. Ja. Mit 20 Sticks. Nein. Wo ist der?
How can I advise?
No.
Ja, der sieht kacke aus, der neuen Dicks.
Thing is set in stone.
Greetings.
Nee. Ah. Mana. What the fuck? Und will ich haben. Jetzt sehe ich viel. Deswegen, ne? Nein! Warum hat er das getan? Der Verrückte. Hier kommt das hin. So, gehen wir mal da rein. In die Ardura-Karawane. Lasst mich rein. Weiter hier.
To him. She wants us to help her in this quest.
The beast is on the move.
While we will later discuss Xana, her journey, and what we do for her, let's establish the story of Xana's father.
Who goes there?
20 years ago, the High Templar of
wares
Oria
are
was a man
renowned.
named Venarius. Venarius was raised by his poor single mother in Theopolis. In Synthesis League, an old man named Kavas ushers us into fragmented memories to help him discover his own past, as he has completely lost his memory.
Dreibach ist echt hart, ey. Ich muss die geile Low-Level-Hammer kriegen.
One of the memories we explore is told from the perspective of a young boy, which is actually young Venarius, who, spoilers for Synthesis League, is actually Kavas. In this memory, young Venarius recounts that a man in uniform visits. He is from the courts. He says the Templar have alms for widows like my mother, but she must collect in person. We go to the church together, and I wait outside in the garden. Mother comes from around the rear.
I guess you.
Her eyes are red, and her
I am a
clothes are
Sala.
torn.
Remain a threat.
She doesn't look at me, but she grabs my hand.
Consultus
Man comes
Asala.
over often after
Asala,
that.
I want to consult with you.
The
But I
beast
don't like
has,
him.
and we might have betrayal connect.
Venarius' mother was
Boy.
presumably used by this Templar in exchange for provisions for her family. In another memory from young Venarius, he was almost exiled, presumably to Rayclast, with a group of Marraketh and homeless people. I feel it. At 8 years old, I was almost exiled by mere happenstance. If my mother had not found me and gotten the Templars to release me, I would have been lost. It's interesting to note that, even before Dominus and Piety used exile to Rayclast as a means to experiment on people secretly, traveling to Rayclast
Why
with
have
a
we
portal
stopped?
and
The
capturing
Halani
exiles
gates
for
are
their
closed for the
thaumaturgical
first time in
experiments.
1,000 years.
Being exiled to
This
Rayclast
can
was
only
punishment
be
used
related
for
to the
years
beast.
before, with knowledge of the cataclysm
Move swiftly.
and the horrible condition of Rayclast. Because of his low
Das ist so
status
unnötig,
and
dieser
treatment,
Part. Ich hasse es. Was
Venarius
soll denn
grew
das?
to resent the order
Oh
of
my
the
God.
Templars. So, as he grew up, he decided to become a Templar to recreate the order from the inside out. Kavas, as he begins regaining his memory as High Templar Venarius, says, I was a Templar, yes, but now I remember that I secretly despised them. I understood that they were a diseased organization prone to brutal oppression. Maybe I kept my thoughts to myself and lived a life of quiet desperation, but I feel
Ach,
like
hier.
I was the kind of man who
Plinty.
acted. So what did I do? By following the
Plinty.
Templar's rules and keeping his opinions hidden once in the order, he was able to ascend all the way.
Oh, voll, dass das gut abgeht jetzt mit dem neuen. Hier.
He became
Zack.
They
obsessed
need
with
so much
fortifying
metal for.
that power.
You could outfit an army with a mind
Venarius
of
was
this scale.
interested in the cataclysm of Rayclast, the powers behind such an atrocity, and in particular the works of Malachi.
Destruction!
He sent smugglers over to Rayclast to find powerful eternal artifacts. From one of these smuggling expeditions, a device was found that the smugglers called Miraculous. Venarius had the device delivered secretly from Rayclast to him in his laboratory, but the device was in pieces. So he recruited one of Oriath's most resourceful and astute researchers, the Chief Archon, Valdo Caesarius, to restore the device. Valdo Caesarius is Xana's father. Valdo's title of Chief Archon meant that he was a public figure in Oriath. The term Archon comes from ancient Greece and means a title of a specific public office, a ruler. Xana tells us that her father was a well-educated man. He worked as a researcher in Oriath back when they were allowed to research more than just holy texts. Valdo had experience with researching thaumaturgical books and
Fuck,
artifacts.
die haut nur
and had
einmal
once
zu.
been
Oh
heretical,
mein Gott.
but studying these
Müssen
was
wir
now
lassen.
endorsed by the Templars. In Valdo's journals, he writes, some time ago I was commissioned in the repairing of a strange device. golden machine found broken in the ruins of Rayclast. The High Templar asked that I restore it and weaponize whatever powers it might contain. Venarius did not simply want to rebuild the device, he wanted to weaponize it to some end.
Müssen wir jetzt echt mal
Although
hier
Valdo
hin.
had history with eternal artifacts, he was concerned by Venarius' desire to weaponize his device upon its completion. But the High Templar's notoriety for violence against disobedience forced him to work. He wrote, "I'd considered refusing Venarius. Though my personal politics
Fuck,
remain
wie
my
das
own,
mit selten
I've
ist.
often
Ne?
struggled to follow the instructions and
Ui,
rules
ui.
filled with such malice and
8
hunger.
Sekunden.
Regretfully, I accepted his orders, for I know of many families who have refused the High Templar's power. They have all vanished now." High Templar Venarius, in his desire to transform the High Templars from the corrupt and useless institutions
Viele Muslims rein.
had swung the pendulum to being dominating, cruel, and power-hungry. Valdo Caesarius did not agree with Venarius' ideals, but he was left with no choice. So Valdo began reconstructing this miraculous device in the Templar laboratory in secret, only known to himself, Venarius and his highest court, and his daughter, Xana. As he began the repairs, he realized that something was different about the device. First, it began having effects on Xana. Though I saw it as mostly inconsequential at the time, it is worth noting my daughter, a quiet young thing of 5, suffered nightmares and tantrums unlike any I'd seen.
Oh, die sind fies, ey. Hab ich noch
We
aufgeschrieben.
know that thaumaturgy and the beast are intertwined, and
Die habe ich
the
auch
beast is
aufgekriegt.
referred to as nightmares.
Oh mein
It can
Gott.
speak to people through dreams. There's a possibility that the events that are about to unfold are related to the nightmare itself.
Wir bleiben nicht schon lange genug da für den zweiten
Second
Fist
thing
of War,
Valdo
für den
noticed
Fist
while
of War
repairing this
Angriff.
device was that it was missing some essential piece. Valdo was unable to rebuild this bow, whatever it was. Though it seemed to be mostly functioning, something important appeared to be missing. Worse still, it seemed as if the part required and didn't exist. Not in our reality, anyhow. The thing that made it tick, the thing that was mysteriously vacant, I could only conceive of in the half-baked imaginings of my own mind. In a way, Valdo himself was being influenced by the machine and possibly Nightmare, having
That's
visions
insane.
of the missing piece that he could not fathom.
Was das
but
Overabundance
could imagine.
ausmacht.
One day, after working long hours on this mysterious device, Valdo fell asleep at the base of it, and when he awoke, he was no longer in the Templar laboratory, but had been transported to a beautiful realm he refers to as the Dreamland. Valdo's awakening in the Dreamlands is the beginning of his saga journaled in his Book of Memories. I'll explain later more about this Book of Memories, but there are 16 journal entries written by Valdo regarding his work on the device, these Dreamlands he discovered, all the way up to his disappearance. As he begins exploring this beautiful and different land, he realizes he is being followed, but not by a man, by a shade, a whisper of embodied smoke, barely heard or seen amongst the vegetation. It rose and spoke to me not through language, but through thoughts and pictures, colors and emotions, bursting into my mind like water, billowing up through cracks in the earth.
Crush them!
The shade welcomed me to its land and asked how it was that I arrived. This shade knew of the mysterious device Valdo had been working on and was interested in helping him repair it. The machine was a doorway between my world and the Dreamlands, I was told. The device had been lost, broken and torn apart by villains and thieves. The shade was overjoyed to hear it found and offered to help me rebuild that final missing part. So the Shade had prior experience with this device to the extent of
Advanced
understanding
Kult
how
ist
it worked
117 bis
well enough to
4.
help Valdo create the missing part. The power
Muss ich echt mehr
source,
darauf
like
achten, dass ich
nothing in
da
Valdo's
coole Hämmer
world,
finde, die
that would allow
wenig
the
Stärke
device to be
brauchen.
used once more.
Ich bin nämlich
The
super
Shade,
schwach.
although lacking a body, had powerful thaumaturgy and began teaching Valdo some of its thaumaturgical abilities. Its ability to communicate in a dreamlike way, via images and feelings, is reminiscent of the beast and nightmare, but it is something else entirely. Perhaps the Dreamlands itself had some more powerful connection to thaumaturgy. Maps we've seen before, like Malagaro's Sanctum, use thaumaturgy to open portals to different worlds by the power of Nightmare. Malachi was aware these maps were connected to Nightmare and thus thaumaturgy. Or maybe the Shade itself had such amazing powers of thaumaturgy that it was capable
Auf die muss man
of
echt aufpassen, ey.
regardless. Either way, for weeks, Valdo would sleep by the device in the Templar laboratory each night, and in his sleep, he would apprentice myself to the Shade, allowing it to teach me the ways of this strange place. I learned how to shape and build things from my imagination, forming them in thin air as if by some great thaumaturgical marvel. It was through this tempering of the mind that I, under its instructions, began rebuilding the missing component of the device. And most exciting of all, how to transport such phantasmagorical treasures back into the world of man. With the Shade's instructions, Baldo would be able to create the power source for the device in the
Nicht da lag,
and
aber viel mehr.
transport it into the Templar laboratory in Boreath. High Templar Venarius checked in with Baldo regarding the progress of the device's restoration, eager to have this weapon finished. Baldo did not tell Venarius about his experience with the Dreamland. He would lie and make excuses, so he could continue this mysterious research in secret. The Shade was also very eager to help Baldo finish this missing piece, telling Baldo he would open the gateway between worlds, and then all the goodness of these lands would flow out into Oria, leading us into a new age of prosperity. And for the Shade's help, all that the Shade asked of me was to return the favor when the time came. Finally, as the piece was completed, the Shade shared a secret with Valdo. The Shade shares with Valdo a vision of the past, how the Shade was once king of the Dreamlands. The Shade recounts that a sect of hateful men and women, the Watchers of Decay, rose up to destroy the Shade. Questing to control the land, these terrorists fashioned a powerful blade meant to divorce the king's spirit from his body and curse it to wander his former kingdom while his body blistered in stone. This is how the king became this disembodied Shade. He is the mind locked out of his body. Valdo feels pity for the Shade, writing, "I was mortified. How could people do such cruel things to this humble creature? And where were these villains now? Had they been the same ones whom had made off with the device? Had they been the ones who severed the connection between worlds and ruined its function?" The Shade urges Valdo to follow him deeper into the Dreamlands to see the statue of his body. The Shade led me deep into a dark forest and revealed to me in the depths of a forgotten cave a statue cast from black marble, pierced by what I assumed to be the very same sword from my visions. This sword is known as Starforge. Fun fact, there are 3 people in the Order of the Jinn, which Jun is a part of, that had a hand in getting Starforged to these Dreamlands. Egrin was an Asmiri who was abandoned by his people due to his visions that inspired Tarkus Varuso to lead the Asmiri into the Val Ruins, a journey which cost thousands their lives. Egrin forged Starforge, and his story is seen on Elder Scarabs. Chianga was a mute wind, one of the warbands like Wayland's Brinerot, who was cast out for being different. She delivered the Starforge to the Watchers, and her story is told on Shaper Scarabs. Batusia was an orphan from the Eternal Empire, tasked with investigating maps once in the Order of the Jinn. It's unclear if Batusia was male or female, but Batusia helped use the Starforge against the Shade, and is seen on Cartography Scarabs, a gilded scarab reading, "The Order of the Jinn survives because of your sacrifice, but will be forever wounded by your loss." From this information, we know the Shade had some connection with Rayclast, as these 3 and the Watchers worked together to seal the Shade, this king, and the statue in the Dreamlands, but lived on Rayclast themselves. When Valdo sees the statue of the Shade's body, he begins to have doubts. The effigy was frightening, utterly terrifying to behold. The creature it depicted, a violent and abhorrent thing, stood amidst an altar of ancient wood and bone. The being in the statue did not look human, but monstrous, creature-like. The shade urged Valdo to pull the blade from the statue, to free him, to allow mind and body to reunite. While Valdo initially reached for the sword, he decided to ask the shade more questions, and at merely the suggestion of rebellion, the shade flew into a fury. It flamed red, full of rage, and though it could not speak, it made its intentions very clear. Previously, the shade had sent Valdo visions to teach and assist him, but now the shade used its power of entering minds to terrify and threaten him. I felt my mind torn asunder as images of murder and mutilation were forced upon me. I was doing things, terrible things to the ones I loved, to my daughter. Valdo fled, running from the statue in the shade and hiding in a foxhole, until after a long time he eventually fell asleep and woke up in the Templar laboratory. Valdo ran to his daughter Xana after having experienced these horrible visions of harming her, and promised he would never ever let her go again. And for months Valdo stopped working on the device, instead researching as much as he could about it and the shade. During these months of study, Valdo said that every day the slimed and poisoned tendrils of fear grip ever tighter into his flesh, making one wonder if the shade still had some access to his mind, or if this is just an aptly foreshadowing description of Valdo's mental turmoil. Eventually, Aramir, a scholar whom Valdo greatly admired, sent him a shipment of artifacts about the Watchers, the hateful men and women that had sealed the shade out of its body with the Starforge. We have met Aramir, who now lives amongst the Asmiri on Rayclast. We know he worked with High Templar Venarius' successor, Dominus, to research thaumaturgical artifacts of the Val and other people of Rayclast, so it is likely that Aramir and Valdo Caesarius have a history of working together. According to the artifacts sent by Aramir, the Watchers of Decay and the people of Rayclast were terrorized by a being they called the Elder. This Elder was a creature of malignant madness, born of that oblivion from before time itself began. Once only an abstract expression, the Elder was given a physical form. The Elder is not a creature or a god, but some embodiment of evil that has existed forever. The Elder created this bauble, importantly not the device Valdo has been working with, to enter Rayclast. It fashioned for itself a bauble of chaos and secret worlds to use as a kind of hunting ground. This bauble is undoubtedly the dreamlands I've uncovered. It seems the Elder could travel between worlds, like we can when we use a map device, and perhaps the dreamlands was just another one of these worlds. Perhaps it is the original location the Elder manifested for its physical form. Either way, the Elder hungered and traveled to Rayclast to satiate itself. The artifact said that the Elder came here out of hunger, preferring victims of a younger flesh. It became the boogeyman, dragging our children off into the night, casting them into its realm of shadow and feasting upon their nightmares undisturbed, for it was imagination that truly satiated it. The Elder captured the children and took them to its dreamlands before feasting on them, where their fate could be presumed but was ultimately unknown. Again, the hunger for nightmares is an interesting parallel to the beast and its power of nightmare. Whether there's any relationship between the beast, thaumaturgy, and the Elder isn't made explicit, but there's obvious themes between all of them. Imagination as a fuel, having power and influence over dreams and imagination, and giving others access to thaumaturgy. Regardless, the Watcher's artifacts say that the Elder was trying to sustain and birth forth its true self, the oblivion from outside time and space, the decay. The Elder, even when its shade and body were unbroken, had not reached some final true self, some form or goal it wanted to achieve, and needed the fuel of imagination to become the decay the Watchers believed was its ultimate goal. One of the memories from Synthesis League is from someone who experienced the Elder's terror, perhaps even a Watcher themselves. They recall, "We pursue the demon on foot to the edge of the woods. the child it carries does not cry out. Aneris follows closely, but I hesitate out of fear. The demon and child are gone, and Aneris stands frozen, pale as the moon. He whispers something I do not understand and falls, dead. I fear we will be hunted to extinction. This memory shows that many children had already been captured by the Elder, to the point that this person worried about extinction. Those adults who stood in its way or fought back were killed. Like Hitava, it seems the Elder had an almost endless hunger, but on an even more devastating scale. The Watchers of Decay could not destroy the Elder itself, but by locking up its physical form in the Dreamlands, they were able to prevent the Elder from continuing to feed and grow, and to stop the process of this decay. With help from members of the Order of the Jinn, they created the Blade Starforge, and they also were the creators of the exact device Valdo has been restoring to enter the Elder's pocket dimension, the Dreamlands. Valdo writes, they built the device, bringing with them the blade, a weapon capable of divorcing agency from form, to give the Elder a kind of eternal rest. Because the Elder cannot be killed. In that statue, they left it starved, unable to hunt. But as Valdo had experienced, the Elder's form may be trapped in stone, but its agency roams free. I have met it. The shade that had assisted Valdo in restoring the Watcher's device was this Elder. Thank you so much for watching. It's your boy Noodle. I know most people wanted to see longer videos in one installment, but that video would be 50 minutes and I've been behind on videos, so it's broken into 2 parts. Thanks as always to my patrons. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or check out my stream at twitch.tv/kittencatnoodle. And until part 2, stay sane, Exile. Well, it's about time to look into the PoE 2 lore. Pretty cool they're bringing up the Feridun. I wonder if Nanette's going to have anything to do with it. I mean, probably not, since they dropped all those heist contracts, but the seed of corruption is pretty on the nose. Interesting the Feridun have it. Let me just look through the lore compilation. Is there any connection between Feridun and corruption? No. It can't be. This dialogue, it's from the contracts. They wouldn't do that. They can't just... Why do you taunt me with forbidden knowledge?
Destruction!
The second Path of Exile 2 trailer shows an act where we join up with a traveling Mariketh caravan, the Ardura, to track down an evil seed of corruption. The Feridun, Mariketh rejects officially introduced into the game during heist, have possession of this seed. The events of PoE 1, but there are many pieces connecting the current story and the future in this new trailer. For one, the Ardura are likely the Mariketh tribe that Adia is from in Heist. She didn't name her tribe, but she described them as a group that travels by caravan from the northern Vastirian plains. She also knows of the Feridun, something other Mariketh we've encountered, like those in Highgate, have not mentioned by name. The evil group in this trailer, these Feridun, connect back to Nanette, another Heist member. We don't learn much about Nanette's past or desires because there were 2 contracts for Nanette that didn't end up in the game. The dialogue and quest items have been data mined, but sadly Nanette still has no actual canon in-game quests. From the dialogue actually in the game, there's no explicit connection between Nanette and the future Feridun we see in the trailer. Obviously, things can change after 20 years. Adia and Nanette have animosity between them, but neither mention their tribe's war. Likely, this seed of corruption that the Feridun now possess has caused extra tensions between the groups. What is the seed of corruption? Assuming it's as it seems, it has to be the original seed from which the beast was born. There's a possibility it's a completely new item or entity, but the evidence for it being the beast seed is strong. There is mention from the hooded one in the trailer that the seed needs to be sought once more. A call back to us taking down the beast in the current campaign.
Oh,
When we work with Sin, he describes the dark ember of the beast as a seed in Act 9. And in Act 6, Sin literally describes creating the beast as planting a seed. Throughout the current game, the cataclysm and the nightmare associated with the beast is described as corruption more times than I want to count. Sin, Tasuni, Oyen, Valenta, Shabi, Vol, Mario, Nessa, Kaum. So what is the connection between the Feridun and this seed? I made a video previously about Tasuni, the Highgate Mariketh who should have been Feridun, and his connection to Beast and Nightmare. Nanette also describes hearing strange voices when she's around us, and we work with Sin, the Beast's creator, and utilize virtue gems that are physical embodiments of the Beast's corruption. We're certainly steeped in Nightmare, and the two Feridun, or Feridun equivalent characters we meet seem corruption sensitive, so to speak. Perhaps there's some connection between the Feridun tribe as a whole and the beast. The trailer also says that this malevolent force is 3,000 years old. The current year is around 1600 in PoE 1, so 1620 in PoE 2. 3,000 years ago is actually long before the fall of the Vol in 400 BC, about 1,000 years before that, so I suspect this date of 3,000 years refers to the creation of the beast. That would give time for people to have lived with and recorded the events of their gods before they all disappeared, put to sleep by the beast. We know that the Asmeri and Vol became more intertwined around 900 BC, about 2,500 years ago, but writings of Asmeri and Vol gods depict them as enemies. The beast's creation couldn't have been so far in the past no one wrote about the gods, but also not likely after the Asmeri and Vol integration. So, that all lines up. This seed of corruption is very probably the seed of the beast, and the Feridun people seem to have a connection to the beast. Besides the seed being carried by Feridun caravans, we see it appear, or at least its influence appears, in the fight with the Perennial King. This is a new boss encounter. The Feridun defector says she was following a king, but that he was not the man she once knew when she meets our exile. The king of the Feridun is not brought up in the current game, except in those pesky, non-existent Nanette quests. Nanette's non-canon, very interesting, and completely available for me to read questline was to learn about an ancient man named Jamonra, who had tried to unite the Feridun and meet with the Mariketh Sekimas to allow the Feridun to be seen as legitimate in Mariketh eyes. We learn that the Sekimas killed Jamonra when he sought acceptance for the Feridun, and Nanette's reaction is to find Jamonra's tomb and raise him from the dead by empowering him with corruption. Are you kidding me? Is this why GGG took out these contracts? Because they have a direct and amazing connection to the story of PoE 2? I had assumed maybe there was a bug in the boss fight, but how could they take out such an exciting story? So let me give you the details, but bear in mind, this is all alleged even if we can look at the text in front of us. Nanette's first non-existent contract for us is to find a Book of Jamonra, a story about a bold warrior who wanted to unite the Feridun for the purpose of bringing them back into the Mariketh, or at least being recognized by the Mariketh as a legitimate and equal tribe. We know that Adia claims she doesn't hate Nanette or the Feridun, she simply doesn't think of her at all, so it's likely that before Path of Exile 2, the Feridun were known, but pointedly ignored by the Mariketh. Nanette wants recognition for herself and the Feridun, and Jamonra had attempted that in the past. But when we retrieve the book, theoretically, it says that the Sekimas Jamonra met with poisoned him rather than listening to his plight or fighting him honorably. After reading this, Nanette decides the Mariketh will never willingly take in or recognize the Feridun, and she's probably right. But her solution isn't to back down, it's to go find Jamanra's grave. She says, "In this land of madness where the dead rise and legendary figures return, I have a reasonable suspicion Jamanra can be found and released from his tomb. Jamanra can finish what he began thousands of years ago, and if he is empowered by corruption this time around, then no cowardly poison will be able to stop him." It's important to notice here that Nanette no longer wants to appease the Mariketh. She is simply raising Jamanra as a leader powerful enough to protect the Feridun from any
Dings finden,
attacks,
noch einen Slot
and
mehr
with
zu
the
kriegen.
power of corruption, he will not be poisoned or killed easily. So in our second non-existent contract, called Jamanra's Rest, we take Nanette to Jamanra's grave. We can only presume what goes down here, but I'm quite sure Nanette succeeds in resurrecting Jamanra, since she says at the end of the contract that Jamanra was a raving mad monster. While we'll never know for sure, here's what I assume happens. Nanette brings some corruption to Jamanra's tomb. He is resurrected. A fight goes down and either Nanette kills Jamanra or Jamanra escapes. I'm pretty confident in saying we were intended to fight Jamanra, as his monster information exists in PoEDB. Since there's no dialogue data mined during the contract itself, we can't know what happened. But let's assume it's the latter. We raise Jamanra, Nanette tries to convince him to become leader of the Feridun. A fight ensues, and the now corrupted Jamanra escapes. Whether Jamanra was always a raving mad monster that the Mariketh were right to kill, or if the corruption and raising from the dead turned him mad. If he escaped, especially with the aid of corruption, it's very possible that the perennial king we see in Path of Exile 2 is Jamanra. He might have actually gone to lead the Feridun, but led them down a path of nightmare and corruption, having them dig out the seed Sin planted in the Highland Mountains, now carrying the seed of corruption with them on their caravan. Nanette doesn't say she wants to lead the Feridun or even return to them after this contract. If anything, she is completely defeated. She wants to continue living with the rogues and drink her problems away. All in all, I can say with confidence that this seed of corruption is the beast seed that Sin claims to have planted so long ago, maybe even exactly 3,000 years ago, as mentioned in the trailer. The Feridun, deformed members of the Mariketh, have so far hinted at an innate connection to the beast and nightmare. Maybe their deformities arise from being so close to the seed of the beast itself, their physical maladies being a representation of the corruption they are born with, like marks of the nightmare. Will we see Nanette in Path of Exile 2? I don't think so. Is the perennial king actually Jamanra?
Oh my god, no.
Is the connection between the seed of corruption
Ingenieur.
and Feridun already established?
Dem Ingenieur
and
ist nichts zu schwer.
Absolutely. Now, for the real question, how can I blame this all on Tasumi? Thank you so much for watching. It's your boy Noodles. Once again, I've been debated with the missing Nanette contracts. If you like this video, like and subscribe, and also our podcast called Baited Expectations. The link for that is in the description below, as well as some other socials and whatnot. This Feridun stuff is going to drive me insane, but I hope you can stay safe, Exile. Our Exile returns to another video in Noodle's complete lore series. This video covers Act 9. Let's begin. After killing Solaris and Lunaris, we enter the familiar aqueducts to travel to Highgate. Previously, water taken from the mountains and the dried lake flowed down these
Das
aqueducts
kann doch
to
nicht
Sarn.
wahr, da schon
Now this
Farben.
water is replaced with blood
Och,
from the
nö.
beasts we have slain. In Highgate, there's a casket where Lady Diala once stood, with her corpse inside.
Ah, Fug.
The effort of using the rapture device, or perhaps the death of the beast, has killed her. There is a lovely memorial surrounding her, but the casket stands alone. Besides the obvious issue of blood replacing the water supply of Highgate, there is political unrest. Kira has disappeared, and she has kidnapped Sekima Oyun. Kira, a descendant of Deshret, was always opposed to Oyun's decision to open Highgate to outsiders like Pateris and Vanya, and ourselves. Kira seeks out Garukan, a Mariketh goddess revived from the beast's death, and plans to sacrifice Oyun to her. With Sekima Oyun gone, the Akara, or tribe, is fighting over who will be their new leader if Oyun does not return. There are two people fighting for potential leadership, the first of which is Tasuni, Kira's brother. Tasuni, as we've seen, has some degree of prophetic ability. Now he has foreseen us returning.
Es ist zu
He says Kira
schwer
has
für
grown
mich, ich bin
obsessed
zu
with the
schwach.
culture of the wastes, Garukan, and believes that sacrificing Oyun to Garukan will allow Kira to become a red Sekima, a warlord leader destined to bring all Americas together as
Wait.
one Akara. Tasuni asks us to find Kira and kill her, as Tasuni fears he would be too merciful. Also, he's blind, so that might be part of the problem.
All right.
He believes Kira has taken the Sekima feather, the symbol of leadership among the tribe, for her sacrifice. Tasuni wants us to find
Sounds
Kira, kill her, save Oyun, and return Oyun and the feather to Highgate. A new woman speaks to us named Irasha. She can be seen in Act 4 taking care of Roas, but now she introduces herself. She is concerned that Tasuni, the brother of Kira, wants to take Oyun's throne. A man has never ruled the Mariketh, and moreover, Oyun is not yet dead. Irasha even suspects that Tasuni may
Oh.
somehow be working with Kira.
Damit
Irasha
verabschiede
is
ich mich
traditional,
aber
blunt, and
ins Bett.
skeptical.
Man sieht sich
She
später
saw
nochmal.
Kira take Oyun
Danke
out
fürs
into the desert
Einschalten.
with the
Vielleicht
Sekima
bis
feather.
später. Bye
Irasha wants
bye.
us to find the traitorous
Da
being,
geht's auch mit hier.
Kira, kill her, and bring Oyun and the feather
Der
back.
Dingens weiter.
As we can see, Tasuni and Irasha seem
heißt
to
die?
want the same.
Ketten, ja. Ich schaue mir gerade mal nur so die ganze Lore an. Weil ich immer alles skippe. Gute Nacht.